Chapter 1277. Calamity in the Sea of Bitterness. In the Emperor's tomb, the huge black storm was still sweeping, as if it would never change. However, if one were to take a closer look, one would see that there were countless black chi bursting out from the black storm and spreading in all directions. These black chi were like dark clouds that spread towards the depths of the Sea of Bitterness. Within the black chi, there were ferocious human figures that were constantly wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves. On the excellent Spirit Island, countless warriors raised their heads to look at the sky. They all saw the dark clouds that covered the sky in the direction of the Emperor's tomb. What is that? There seems to be some kind of creature within the black clouds? The gazes of many warriors were quite sharp. With a glance, they saw the strange human figure that was continuously surging within the black cloud. The faint ghostly wails and wolf howls that were faintly emitted caused many warriors to feel a chill in their hearts. The excellent Spirit Island was naturally not the closest island to the Emperor's tomb. Those islands that were closer were already covered by the black clouds. Following that, many warriors on the excellent Spirit Island were horrified to discover that strange human figures were descending from the depths of the black clouds. Ah! Miserable cries suddenly rang out continuously. Following that, the warriors on the excellent Spirit Island discovered that the islands that the black clouds passed were filled with endless fishy winds, accompanied by miserable cries. What exactly is that thing? That thing seems to be devouring the flesh of the warriors? The closest island to the excellent Spirit Island was already covered by the black clouds. At this moment, the warriors on the excellent Spirit Island finally saw the human figures that were constantly moving within the black clouds. They saw that these human figures had insect-like heads, and their bodies were covered with tough shells. They looked extremely terrifying. What was even more strange was that these strange human figures actually had 12 arms. There were many of these strange creatures in the black clouds. They were densely packed. At a glance, one's scalp would go numb. Swoosh! 3 sun and moon shuttles cut through the void and instantly landed in the main city in the center of the island. 9 figures walked out of the sun and moon shuttles. They were Moyen Wushang, Kanan, Gatha, Soft Note, Mo Lingtian, Zhuowen's Buddhist avatar, LV Itao, Clear Lotus, and Fallen Star. Because Zhuowen had the 100 transformation technique, he could completely alter the appearance of the Buddhist avatar, making it no different from the main body. We have to find Grandmaster Lan Miao and the others as soon as possible. Right now, in the academy, only they have enough power to mobilize enough manpower and resources to defend against the incoming attack of the Sky Worm clone. After getting off the Sun-Moon shuttle, Moyen Wushang said as he walked towards Jiashan College. Because of the existence of Zhuowen's Buddhist avatar, they knew what had happened in the Emperor's tomb. At the same time, they also knew that these strange figures were the heavenly insect avatars. In the square of the Arcane Tower, Grandmaster Lan Miao, Grandmaster Tusida, Grandmaster Tian Yi, and Grandmaster Wu Kong gathered together. The 4 of them were Mu Feng's direct disciples. Their mental strength was at the complete 6th grade. Although that was the case, the 4 of them were also from the outer courtyard. They were Mu Feng's disciples in the outer courtyard, so they naturally didn't know Mu Feng's true identity. In this regard, Moyen Wushang and the others didn't tell the 4 about Mu Feng. After all, there was no proof. If they said that Mu Feng was a spy from the Blue Dragon Hall, they couldn't guarantee that the 4 of them wouldn't attack because they suspected them. Zhuowen, Wushang, you said that the creature in the black clouds came out from the Emperor's tomb and can absorb the energy of warriors' flesh and blood? Grandmaster Lan Miao frowned and said with a slightly ugly expression. Not only Grandmaster Lan Miao, Grandmaster Tian Yi, Grandmaster Wu Kong, and Grandmaster Tusida didn't look any better. After all, what Zhuowen and Moyen Wushang said was really beyond their expectations. They didn't expect that in the Emperor's tomb there would be such a strange creature like the heavenly worm. It could absorb the energy of warriors' flesh and blood to enhance its strength and escape. If what you said is true, this is really a disaster for the Bitter Sea. Grandmaster Lon Miao sighed softly. Now we have to stop the heavenly worm avatar. Otherwise, the fate of the entire Excellent Spirit Island will be the same as the other islands. It's very likely that it will cease to exist. Buddhist Zhuowen said seriously. Lon Miao nodded and said, the outer court has the Cultivation Tower and the Arcane Tower. These two iconic buildings have powerful defensive abilities. However, the Cultivation Tower is under the control of the Dean. We can't use the power of the Cultivation Tower. We can only open the defensive array of the Arcane Tower. Leave the Cultivation Tower to me. Grandpa has already taught me the method to open the Cultivation Tower's defensive array. Now, what we need to do is to gather all the disciples of the Excellent Spirit Academy into the two towers to resist the invasion of the Heavenly Worm Avatar. Moyan Wushang said with a serious expression. In that case, it's best. The four of us will open the Arcane Tower's defensive array first. You guys assign some people to gather all the disciples of the Academy. When the time comes, we will enter the tower to avoid the disaster. After Grandmaster Lon Miao finished speaking, he hurriedly entered the Arcane Tower with Grandmaster Tusida and the other two. After all, they could see that the speed of the black cloud was extremely fast. If they didn't act quickly, it would be too late when the black cloud completely descended on the Excellent Spirit Island. Zhuowen, Jianan and Gatha, you guys help me gather all the disciples of the Academy. I will open the Cultivation Tower's defensive array. Moyan Wushang said with a serious expression. The Buddhist Dao's Zhuowen nodded and hurriedly left with Jianan's group. Not long after, the Arcane Tower and the Cultivation Tower, the two most iconic buildings of the Academy, actually erupted with pillars of light that soared into the sky. Two terrifying powers spread out, enveloping the entire Excellent Spirit Island, causing countless warriors to raise their heads and look in that direction. There were countless runes flowing on the surface of the Arcane Tower. They were like small swimming tadpoles. They looked extremely mysterious. On the other hand, the Cultivation Tower burst out with ice and fire energy. On one side there was a sea of fire. On the other side there was an extremely cold place. It looked extremely strange. All the disciples of the Excellent Spirit Island, come to the Arcane Tower and the Cultivation Tower to avoid the impending disaster. You only have 10 minutes. If you don't come, the two towers will automatically close. At that time, it will be impossible to enter even if you want to. A vigorous voice rang out from the sky above the Academy. Zhuowen led Jianan, Gatha and the others as he shouted towards the ground. His voice was amplified by Yuan power. It spread throughout the entire Academy and filled the ears of many warriors. What? The Arcane Tower and the Cultivation Tower are open. We have to go in quickly. It seems that the black cloud is an extremely ominous thing. The other students scattered in the Academy heard the voice that reverberated in the sky. They were startled at first, but after they reacted, they rushed towards the Arcane Tower and the Cultivation Tower. After 10 minutes, at the top of the Arcane Tower and the Cultivation Tower, Moyan Wushang and Grandmaster Lon Miao looked at each other. Shortly after, they waved their sleeves and completely sealed the entrances of the two towers. In the sky above the Excellent Spirit Island, there was only the soaring ice and fire energy and the spiral rune energy left. There's still us. We haven't entered yet. There were still many warriors outside the two towers. Because they were too far away, they didn't arrive in 10 minutes. They were blocked outside the two towers. However, no matter how they screamed, the entrances of the two pagodas remained motionless. The time it took to brew a cup of tea was already the limit. At this moment, the black clouds had already filled the sky above the entire Excellent God Island. In an instant, the originally bright Excellent God Island became incomparably dark. Awo! Waves of ghost-like wails and wolf-like howls spread out from the black cloud. Shortly after, black shadows descended from the black cloud like falling snow. No! What are these things? Why are they so strong? Help! A series of wails came from the entire Excellent Spirit Island. Whether it was the students who had yet to arrive at the Arcane Tower or the Cultivation Tower, or the warriors who were scattered in other areas of the island, they all became the targets of the heavenly insect avatars. The individual strength of these heavenly insect avatars was at the level of low-level Emperor Realm. In the Excellent Spirit Island, those who had such strength were simply rare. Hence, this was a one-sided massacre. Under the attack of the heavenly insect avatars, the warriors of the Excellent Spirit Island were utterly defeated. The consequence of failure was to become the nourishment of the heavenly insect avatars. Their flesh and blood were absorbed, leaving not even a trace behind. The martial artists in the Arcane Towers and Cultivation Towers naturally saw what was happening outside. Their faces all paled, and some of the more mentally fragile fellows even began to retch. This method of swallowing the flesh and blood of martial artists was far too bloody. They had never seen anything like it before. Moyan Wushang quietly looked at the scene. Although there was a trace of reluctance in her beautiful eyes, she had to do this. After all, whether it was the time or the space of the Cultivation Tower, they were limited. She could only protect a portion of the people, but she could not save everyone on the Excellent Spirit Island. Don't blame yourself. Our ability is limited. It's already good enough that we can save a portion of the people. After all, we are not saviors. What we can do is to do our best to save the people that we should save. A hand gently patted Moyan Wushang's shoulder. Immediately, Moyan Wushang turned her body slightly and saw Zhuowen behind her, calmly looking at her. You're right. We'll do our best. Moyan Wushang revealed a smile, but it was quite bitter. Boom. Boom. Suddenly, an extremely violent trembling sound was emitted from the entire Cultivation Tower. The numerous warriors in the tower all staggered and almost fell to the ground. What's going on? What's happening outside? Frightened voices filled the Cultivation Tower. After all the warriors stabilized their bodies, their eyes were filled with fear. Those heavenly insect avatars are attacking our Cultivation Tower. Moyan Wushang's beautiful eyes slightly sank as she said in a low voice. Chapter 1278. Demon God Reinforcements. Whether it was the Cultivation Tower or the Arcane Tower, both were shaking violently, as if they were on the verge of collapsing. Many warriors in the tower were frightened. Although the two towers trembled intensely, they were not broken by the countless number of heaven insect avatars. This caused many of the warriors in the towers to inexplicably sigh in relief. Their hearts were filled with joy. Zhuowen, we can't go on like this. If these heavenly insect avatars don't retreat, won't we be trapped in the tower forever? Moyan Wushang looked at Zhuowen. Her beautiful eyes were full of worry. Although their safety was now guaranteed, they couldn't go on like this. Being trapped in the Cultivation Tower was not a solution. Don't worry, the rescue will be here soon. Zhuowen of the Buddhist Tao laughed. He had sensed from the Devil Tao doppelganger that Yao Dai had brought countless demon soldiers and arranged a powerful demon god array. They were rushing towards the wonderful Spirit Island. Of course, wherever they passed, the heavenly insect doppelganger along the way were all annihilated by the demon god. Zhuowen from the Buddhist Tao knew that with the speed of the demon god, it wouldn't take long for them to reach Excellent God Island. At that time, it would be their chance to escape. Rescue? Zhuowen, are you comforting me? These heavenly insect avatars are too terrifying. Unless it's an advanced emperor, it's impossible to rescue us. Moyan Wushang shook her head. She didn't believe Zhuowen's words. She obviously thought that Zhuowen was comforting her. Zhuowen from the Buddhist Tao smiled faintly and didn't explain too much. He knew that when the demon god arrived at Excellent God Island, Moyan Wushang would naturally understand. The pagoda was still shaking. This violent shaking caused many warriors in the pagoda to be distraught, making it difficult for them to enter a meditative state to cultivate. After all, even a saint would find it difficult to cultivate in such a state. Boom! Boom! Suddenly, the violently shaking body of the cultivation tower stopped abruptly. The gazes of the numerous cultivators, who were originally upset, suddenly froze. Moreover, they revealed suspicious expressions. They were somewhat puzzled as to why the cultivation tower, which was originally shaking, suddenly stopped. Bang, bang, bang! At the same time, the warriors in the tower heard the earth-shattering sounds of battle coming from outside the tower. It was as if an extremely terrifying and violent battle was taking place outside the tower. However, the crowd didn't think that was possible. After all, the number of celestial insect clones was too terrifying. Every one of them had the strength of a low-level emperor. What kind of existence could fight against so many celestial insect clones? Hence, many warriors curiously looked through the windows of the tower. Soon after, they were shocked to discover that a 10,000 feet large figure was walking over from the void. Demonic power surged all over his body. The 10,000 feet large demonic blade in his hand danced, and many heavenly insect avatars were directly shattered. What is that? It seems to be destroying those strange creatures. Is it here to save us? Looking at this scene, many warriors were stunned. Moyan Wushang, who was originally worried sick at heart, relaxed. Her pair of beautiful eyes suddenly fell on Zhuo-Wen of the Buddhist way. She said in shock, "Zhuo-Wen, is this the rescue you were talking about?" Zhuo-Wen of the Buddhist Tao nodded and smiled. Moyan Wushang's voice wasn't soft, so the other cultivators in the cultivation pagoda heard him clearly. What? Did Zhuo-Wen summon this godlike 10,000-meter-tall illusory figure? Is this true? Whispers rumbled in the tower. Everyone's eyes fell on Zhuo-Wen. There was shock, gratitude, envy, and of course, doubt. Is he bragging? The strength of this 10,000 feet large figure is at the 7th level Emperor realm. How could it be summoned by Zhuo-Wen? After all, he is only a peak heavenly master. Voices of doubt also erupted one after another. Many cultivators' eyes were filled with suspicion. They thought that Zhuo-Wen was just trying to please the crowd with claptrap. What do you mean by this? Brother Zhuo would never lie. Since you think that this 10,000 feet large figure was not summoned by Brother Zhuo, then who do you think it was? Jiao Nan's face turned red and he said unhappily. Zhuo-Wen grabbed Jiao Nan's shoulder with one hand and shook his head as he said, "There's no need to be angry because of this. We'll naturally know who's right and who's wrong after the demon god's projection dispels all the Skyworm clones." Hearing Zhuo-Wen's words, although Jiao Nan was indignant, he did not dare to act rashly. He could only nod and return to Zhuo-Wen's side. "Looks like you are guilty." Suddenly, an ear-piercing voice sounded, causing Zhuo-Wen to frown. His gaze fell on a figure not far away from the cultivation tower. This figure was extremely sturdy and his body was filled with a domineering aura. His gaze was somewhat venomous as he stared at Zhuo-Wen. Perhaps because he had sensed Zhuo-Wen's gaze, his expression was somewhat unnatural. However, he still met Zhuo-Wen's gaze without any fear. "Di Ba." Zhuo-Wen narrowed his eyes. He was a little surprised. This person was Di Ba, who was ranked second on the Heavenly Master list. He had some conflicts with him back then. When the Emperor's tomb opened, Di Ba did not enter because he was in seclusion. Looking at his aura, he was much stronger than before. Although he had not advanced to the Emperor realm, he should be close. Perhaps it was because his cultivation had increased, but Di Ba was much more confident when facing Zhuo-Wen. "What does my guilty conscience have to do with you?" Zhuo-Wen stared at Di Ba indifferently. A terrifying Emperor's aura surged out from his body, enveloping the entire tower like a tsunami. As Di Ba was targeted by Zhuo-Wen, he had to bear the most terrifying Emperor's aura. Plop! This Emperor's aura was too terrifying. Di Ba could not bear it and knelt on the ground. His face was as pale as snow, and his forehead was covered with bean-sized beads of sweat. "You have advanced to the Emperor realm?" Di Ba supported his body with all his might as he looked at Zhuo-Wen in front of him. His eyes were filled with fear. The surrounding warriors who had doubted Zhuowen also trembled and did not dare to speak anymore. Zhuowen was only a new student of this year. He had started later, but he had reached the imperial power plane first. This speed of advancement made many cultivators feel ashamed. They were so ashamed that they could not show their faces. Zhuowen waved his sleeve, and the heavy emperor's aura slowly retracted. Diba still maintained his kneeling position. He lowered his head and did not dare to look at Zhuowen again. He found that at this moment, he was like a clown in front of Zhuowen. It was extremely laughable, and he even tried to provoke Zhuowen. After withdrawing the emperor's aura, Zhuowen ignored Diba. To him, Diba was just a small character. He did not put him in his eyes. At this moment, his gaze fell on the demon god array outside the tower. Inside, Zhuowen, Wu Dai Mo Yen, Bai Yen, Taimo Lord, Lu Hantian, and Yao Dai were all there. Boom, boom, boom. The power of the demon god array was terrifying. With a casual swing of the demon blade, countless sky insect avatars were annihilated. They turned into formless black gas and dissipated in the air. About an hour later, the sky insect avatars on Excellent Spirit Island were completely annihilated by the demon god. Boom! The demon god stepped onto the empty ground in the outer courtyard, looking down at the Arcana Tower and the Cultivation Tower from above. Soon after, the people in the towers discovered that several figures had rushed out from the demon god, including Dean Mo Yen and Bai Yen, whom they were extremely familiar with. Grandfather. Looking at Bai Yan's figure, Moyan Wushang immediately opened the entrance of the Cultivation Tower. With a step, he rushed out of the Cultivation Tower and rushed towards Moyan Wushang. It's the Dean. It seems that the one who summoned this powerful phantom should be the Dean, and not Zhuowen. Looking at Moyan and Bai Yen, countless warriors in the tower started to discuss spiritedly. Their eyes were filled with excitement. In their hearts, they had a feeling of being reborn after a calamity. Buddhist Zhuowen also followed Moyan Wushang out of the Cultivation Tower. Behind him were Lve Tao and the other two. The three of them rushed towards Lu Hantian with excitement in their eyes. With Moyan Wushang taking the lead, the other warriors in the tower naturally rushed out of the tower and gathered around Moyan Wushang. After all, Moyan Wushang was the dean of the outer courtyard. With his existence, the entire academy seemed to have a backbone. Wu Dai. I will bring the demon soldiers and continue to rush towards the other islands. After all, there are too many sky insect avatars. We must destroy them one by one. Otherwise, it will be troublesome. In the demon god array, Yao Dai said to Wu Dai. Then, she brought the demon god array and rushed out, leaving Excellent Spirit Island. Dean, you are really amazing. You can actually invite such a powerful helper to help our Excellent Spirit Island escape from a life and death calamity. Yes. If it wasn't for you, Dean, our Excellent Spirit Island would really be in a terrible situation. At that time, I'm afraid that even the Academy would cease to exist. Everyone was surrounding Moyan and Bai Yen. Cheers and cheers were unceasingly resounding. Many people were praising Moyan and Bai Yen in their language. Moyan Wushang revealed an astonished expression and said, "Who told you that the demon god array was invited by this old man?" As soon as these words came out, the surrounding cheers died down. Many people's gazes fell on Zhuowen. Could it really be that this Zhuowen was the one who invited this demon god array? All of this is thanks to Zhuowen. If it wasn't for Zhuowen, this old man's life wouldn't exist. Moreover, the demon god array came out of the emperor tomb because of Zhuowen. It helped Bitter Sea get rid of those sky insect avatars. Moyan Wushang's following words immediately caused the surrounding warriors to become silent. Their gazes were filled with complicated expressions as they fell on Zhuowen. They didn't expect that the demon god array was really summoned by Zhuowen. Previously, they actually doubted the latter because of this. How laughable was this action? Chapter 1279. Book of Luo On? Your main body is still in the Emperor's tomb, and you're planning to send your clone to the 9 Netherworld realm? Moyen Bai Yan's pupils shrank as he spoke in a somewhat surprised voice. With Zhuowen's aptitude, he already had the qualifications to enter the inner courtyard. But what he was puzzled about was that Zhuowen's main body was still in the Emperor's tomb, so why was he in such a hurry to enter the 9 Netherworld realm? Zhuowen revealed a bitter smile. There were only 5 months left until Mu Qinshue's 3-year cold poison outbreak. If he didn't go to the inner courtyard now, he might not make it in time. Fortunately, the heavenly flame 9 flames karmic fire was stronger than the Buddha's clone. It didn't matter even if his main body couldn't make it in time. As long as his Buddha's clone entered the inner courtyard and found Mu Qinshui, he would be able to solve the problem of Mu Qinshue's cold poison. Is it because of Big Sister Qinshui? Moyen Wushang's beautiful eyes flashed as he spoke in a low voice. There was also a trace of strange emotion in his voice. Zhuowen didn't say anything and only nodded. His eyes revealed a trace of hope and worry. So it's because of that little girl. Since it's like this, you should enter the inner courtyard with me. After all, I still need to hand over Elder Hui Xie's token to Old Man Tiandu. The heavenly insect's clone is too strong. Even if your main body obtained the inheritance of the Emperor's tomb's master, you can only seal it at most. You can't completely solve this problem. Moyen Bai Yan took a deep look at Zhuowen. He had also heard about Mu Qinshue's relationship problems. After all, Moyen Wushang had mentioned it to him before. So he could understand why Zhuowen was so anxious to enter the 9 Netherworld realm. Zhuowen, wait for me for a few days. I need to arrange everything on Excellent Spirit Island. When the time comes, I'll bring you to the 9 Netherworld realm. Moyen Bai Yan said to Zhuowen. All right. Zhuowen nodded in agreement. A figure flashed across the dark void. Zhuowen, who had 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back, instantly appeared on top of a vast mountain range. He stopped and looked into the distance, staring at the void before him. His sharp eyes seemed to be able to see through everything. Senior Yao Dai said that the land of inheritance is in this endless mountain range. I wonder where it is exactly? Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. His gaze landed on the mountain range below. The mountain range below was extremely large. It seemed to be endless, with no end in sight. Thinking up to this point, Zhuowen transformed into a lightning shadow, before instantly entering the mountain range. At this moment, he was worried that Mu Feng would beat him to it. The air above the mountain range was filled with white clouds and mist. Even with Zhuowen's sharp eyes, he could only see things within 100 meters in front of him. Whoosh! After aimlessly traversing the mountain range for about an hour, he was attracted by a strange sound. It's to the front left. Zhuowen muttered in his heart. Taking a step forward, he shot towards the front left. Naturally, his footsteps were extremely light. At the same time, the aura emitted from his entire body was retracted. Zhuowen always had a cautious attitude towards the unknown. If not, it was very likely that he would fail miserably. Bang bang bang! As the sound grew louder and louder, Zhuowen's footsteps also became slower and slower. Finally, he came to a stop on a rock wall. That was because he discovered that the sound came from the other side of the rock wall. It seemed as though someone was smashing something. Damn it! Why is the restriction arranged by this old fellow so powerful? I've already used the incomplete river diagram array to weaken it. Even with Lord's strength, I'm still unable to shatter it. A flustered and exasperated voice suddenly rang out, attracting Zhuowen's attention. It's Mu Feng's voice. Zhuowen's heart trembled as he immediately recognized the owner of the voice. Wasn't it Mu Feng, the one who planned the change in the Emperor's tomb? As he thought of this, Zhuowen retracted his aura. At the same time, his gaze passed through the cracks on the rock wall and landed on the other side. This was a rather large piece of empty land that was filled with rock. At the front of the empty land, there was a pond that was dozens of feet wide. The surface of this pond was extremely calm, just like a glossy mirror. Strangely, there was a gigantic divine turtle floating in the middle of the pond. On the back of the divine turtle, there was an extremely mysterious and large diagram. This diagram was actually similar to the river diagram. The river diagram, the Audiobook, the sage. At the instant when he saw the divine turtle in the pond, this sentence surfaced in Zhuowen's mind. The dragon horse appeared from the yellow river, carrying the river diagram. The divine turtle appeared from the Luo River, carrying the Book of Luo. In this pond, the diagram on the back of the divine turtle was very likely to be the Book of Luo that corresponded to the river diagram. At this moment, both of Mu Feng's hands were pointing in the air. He was actually inscribing a broken river diagram formation. Within the river diagram formation, a dragon horse carrying a broken river diagram on its back was galloping across the boundless yellow river toward the divine tortoise in the pond. Bang! The divine turtle in the pond furiously raised its head. With a stomp of its 4 gigantic claws, its gigantic body leapt into the air. Surrounding its body were pillars of water. As the endless pillars of water shot out, they smashed against the dragon horse's body, causing the dragon horse to retreat a few steps. Whoosh! At the instant when the dragon horse retreated, the divine turtle's head and limbs retracted into its turtle shell. In the next instant, the gigantic turtle shell started to spin rapidly, causing countless gales to sweep up in the surroundings. Like a shadow, the rapidly spinning turtle shell shot out explosively. Bang! With a roar, the dragon horse gave a stomp of its hooves. As the yellow river gushed out, it formed a yellow waterfall in front of it, appearing just like a solid defense. However, in the face of the rapidly spinning turtle shell, the yellow river waterfall was like a piece of paper, instantly shattering apart. In the next instant, the turtle shell heavily smashed against the dragon horse. Oh! With a wail, the dragon horse's gigantic body instantly collapsed. As for Mu Feng, who was inscribing the river diagram array, he gave a muffled snort as he retreated a few steps back. His eyes were filled with both shock and fury. "My lord, it's time for you to take action." At the instant when the dragon horse collapsed, Mu Feng gave a loud roar. In the next instant, a black ray of light shot out from the depths of his forehead. In the next instant, it transformed into a 1,000-foot-tall shadow. Naturally, its appearance was that of the heavenly insect. This divine turtle isn't simple. Although it's not a real body, and is just a shadow created by the Book of Luo's array, its strength cannot be underestimated. The heavenly insect shadow clicked its tongue in wonder. Extending its right hand, it suddenly howled towards the divine turtle. Black chi surged out, causing the surrounding space to collapse and shatter. Bang! The gigantic palm heavily smashed against the divine turtle. In the next instant, the heavenly insect shadow faintly frowned as it discovered that the divine turtle's strength was extremely great. His right hand had nearly collapsed under the might of the divine turtle's attack. "Block it for this lord." The heavenly insect shadow coldly snorted as even more black chi gushed out, transforming into countless black tentacles that wrapped around the rapidly spinning divine turtle, causing it to come to a stop. Bang! At the instant when the divine turtle was bound, an extremely powerful water pillar erupted from the pool. Like a snake, it ferociously rushed out, smashing against the heavenly insect shadow. The latter was instantly smashed apart by the enormous might of the water pillar. Oh! With a howl, the divine turtle took advantage of this opportunity to escape from the binding of the countless tentacles. With a fearful expression, it retreated back into the pool. Its pair of eyes stared intently at the heavenly insect shadow as a sliver of fear surfaced within its eyes. The strength of the heavenly insect shadow was extremely terrifying, causing it to feel rather fearful. What a cunning divine turtle! Mu Feng, as long as this lord is able to tie this divine turtle down, you can find an opportunity to enter the pool. All of a sudden, the heavenly insect shadow said to Mu Feng. Taking a step forward, it stepped into the pool and started to engage in a battle with the divine turtle. Countless splashes of water exploded out, causing a large amount of water to splatter in the surroundings. Terrifying power radiated out, causing the surrounding space to shatter inch by inch. It was an exceedingly terrifying sight. Mu Feng stood at the side of the pool as he quietly watched the scene unfold before him, waiting for an opportunity to enter the pool at any moment. Now's the time. At the moment when the battle between the heavenly insect Shadow and the divine turtle had reached its climax, the divine turtle was suddenly sent flying back dozens of steps by a punch from the heavenly insect Shadow, revealing the entrance to the pool below. Mu Feng's eyes sparkled as he took a step forward. Mental energy gushed out from his entire body, transforming into a shadow as he shot towards the entrance. However, there was a figure that was faster than Mu Feng. With 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back, he instantly appeared before Mu Feng. Sending a ferocious punch rumbling out, it landed directly on Mu Feng's face, causing the latter to be unable to react and could only retreat. Whoosh! At the instant when Mu Feng retreated, the figure had already transformed into an illusory bolt of lightning. In an instant it disappeared before his eyes, entering the entrance to the pool. Arg! Damned Zhuowen! Mu Feng retreated a few steps, only reacting after a long while. Raising his head, he roared furiously towards the heavens, flustered and exasperated. Without a doubt, the one who had forced him back and entered the entrance to the pool was Zhuowen, who had been lying in wait behind the rock wall. At the instant when Zhuowen disappeared into the pool, the divine turtle was enraged. With a howl, waves that blotted the skies swept up from the entire pool. Like the bloody mouth of a gigantic beast, it swallowed the heavenly insect Shadow whole. Clearly, the divine turtle had assumed that the fish that had escaped the net was an accomplice of the heavenly insect Shadow. Therefore, it had vented all of its anger on the heavenly insect Shadow. It's that little bastard again. Mu Feng, you trash. The heavenly insect Shadow was feeling extremely sullen. Thinking about how it had painstakingly fought for an opportunity for Mu Feng, in the end, it had ended up benefiting Zhuowen. Anyone who had encountered such a situation would definitely feel depressed. Mu Feng's mood was even more depressed than the heavenly insects. He had never expected that a troublemaker like Zhuowen would suddenly appear out of nowhere. Arg! The heavenly insect Shadow roared as it unleashed its strongest power, blocking the furious attack of the divine turtle. At the same time, it hurriedly retreated out of the range of the pool, its blood-red eyes turning extremely gloomy. My lord! Mu Feng did not know what to say. His eyes flickered as he trembled with fear. Pa! Chapter 1280. Tower of Trials. Mu Feng was knocked to the ground as his gaze turned cold. However, this coldness only appeared for a moment before it disappeared. He quickly got up and did not dare to say a word. Roar! At this moment, within the pool, the black tortoise's eyes were filled with warning as it stared coldly at Mu Feng and the heavenly insect's Shadow. Then, it entered the pool and chased after Zhuowen. It was responsible for guarding the inheritance within the pool. Naturally, it would not allow any fish to escape the net. Lord! The black tortoise has left. It should be chasing after Zhuowen. Should we enter the pool now? Mu Feng's eyes flashed as he asked. Idiot, do you think that the black tortoise is stupid? The black tortoise has already set up the array of the Book of Luo above the pool. That is the most powerful maze. Even I can't find the entrance now. Originally, I was holding the black tortoise back so that he could not unleash the array of the Book of Luo. Coincidentally, the entrance appeared. However, I did not expect that Zhuowen would be the first to get to it. The heavenly insect's face was ugly as it looked at Mu Feng with an unfriendly gaze. Mu Feng was a yes-man, not daring to say anything. However, his eyes were filled with a sliver of coldness and venom. Mu Feng was an extremely scheming person. All along, he had been the one to scheme against others. Now, he had actually been tricked by Zhuowen. Right now we can only wait. Wait for Zhuowen to come out. If he has really obtained the inheritance of that old fart, we will snatch the inheritance back from him when he comes out. The heavenly insect's shadow said calmly. Mu Feng's eyes flickered as he spoke in a somewhat worried manner. Zhuojing possesses an extremely powerful dragon soul. After breaking through to the Emperor realm, the strength he has displayed is extremely frightening. If he truly comes out, will we really be able to stop him? My strength is constantly increasing. When that kid comes out, I might be able to forcefully break through the seal. At that time, a mere Zhuowen will be nothing, however. Before the heavenly insect's shadow could finish speaking, its face suddenly froze. It cursed in a low voice, "Damn it. That group of demon soldiers has actually walked out of the Emperor's tomb and started massacring my clones. Bastards." At this moment, in the sky above the Sea of Misery, the gigantic demon god's shadow swept across the void as it chased after the heavenly insect's clones. The demon god's shadow was extremely powerful. The Sea of Misery had a strong gravitational force. But in front of the demon god's shadow, as it was still able to fly across the Sea of Misery at an extremely fast speed. Half of the celestial swarm avatars that had spread throughout the Sea of Misery were destroyed by the demon god's shadow. The remaining ordinary celestial swarm avatars shrieked and retreated. They did not dare to fight the demon god's shadow. The heavenly insect's clones that had retreated all retreated into the Emperor's tomb under the guidance of the heavenly insect. Although half of them had been destroyed by the demon god's shadow, the remaining half had absorbed the energy from the flesh and blood of quite a few cultivators. Overall, the heavenly insect's strength was constantly increasing. I can't go to the Sea of Misery. I can only enter the Emperor's tomb first. I'm still a hair away from breaking free. The heavenly insect frowned as it murmured to itself. Its gaze landed on the pool before it. It knew that the most important thing for it to break free right now was the legacy of the old bastard in the pool. As a result, once Zhuowen really did emerge, it had to snatch it away at all costs. At this moment, Mu Feng discovered that the aura of the heavenly insect's shadow beside him was constantly increasing. Surprise filled his eyes. "My lord, your aura," Mu Feng said softly. "I've summoned all the heavenly insect's clones from the Sea of Misery and merged them into my body. What's detestable is that I'm still a little lacking in energy. It's all because of that damned demon soldier. He actually dared to come out of the Emperor's tomb and destroy my heavenly insect's clones," the heavenly insect said coldly. Hearing this, Mu Feng nodded his head. His eyes flickered and no one knew what he was thinking. In the deep, ice-cold pool, a figure with 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back continued to sink, causing waves to surge in the water. I've already been in this pool for an incense stick's worth of time. Why do I feel that this pool is so deep that I can't see the bottom?" Suddenly stopping, Zhuowen looked around at the endless darkness of the underwater world. His brows furrowed. He felt that he had lost his sense of direction and had no idea where to go. "Zhuowen, there's an array of the Book of Luo in this pool. Although you've just entered the entrance of the pool, if you don't break the array of the Book of Luo, it won't be easy to find the legacy in the pool." Xiao Hei's voice suddenly rang out. "Is it the array of the Book of Luo?" Previously, Mu Feng had been longing for the river diagram array. Perhaps the key to breaking the array of the Book of Luo is the river diagram array. "You can try the river diagram array," Xiao Hei continued. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded his head. His right hand tapped on his forehead. The instant he took out the jade cauldron, a water pillar shot towards him. Fortunately, Zhuowen reacted in time. He took a step forward and dodged the water pillar. Soon after, his cold gaze landed on the huge black figure that was rushing towards him. "It's the divine turtle that's chasing after me." Zhuowen quietly stared at the turtle shell that was engulfed by countless water tornadoes. However, he felt a trace of nervousness in his heart. The divine turtle was extremely powerful and was almost comparable to the heavenly insect Shadow. If Zhuowen wasn't nervous, it would be a lie. This array of the Book of Luo was set up by an arcane Saint Master. The power it can unleash is indeed terrifying. If you can reach the realm of an arcane Saint Master, the array you set up will only be stronger, not weaker, Xiao He indifferently said, perhaps because she felt the reverence in Zhuowen's heart. Zhuowen nodded his head and said, "Then I'll try the river diagram array. After all, I have the complete river diagram array on me. I wonder if I can trigger the divine turtle." As he spoke, Zhuowen took a deep breath. His right hand patted the jade cauldron. The river diagram engraved on the jade cauldron exploded with a blazing light. Soon after, Zhuowen gathered mental energy in his hands and sketched out a mysterious path in the air. One could only see the river diagram array being drawn. Oh! A huge draconic horse galloped out of the river diagram array while stepping on the yellow river. It quietly stared at the approaching godly turtle. Whoosh! When it was about 100 meters away from the dragon horse, the divine turtle's huge body stopped. It looked down at the dragon horse that was much smaller than itself. There was a trace of surprise in its eyes. It could feel that although the dragon horse in front of it was much weaker than it, the aura it gave off was very intimate. Its gaze landed on the complete river diagram on the dragon horse's back. There was a trace of sadness in its eyes as it softly said with a hoarse voice, "The river diagram. The complete river diagram. Master's unfulfilled wish. Have you completed it?" The divine turtle's gaze moved away from the dragon horse and landed on Zhuowen. The hostility in its eyes slowly disappeared. Instead, it revealed a strange sense of intimacy. Looking at the intimacy in the eyes of the divine turtle, Zhuowen's gaze revealed a trace of surprise. However, he also knew that it should be attributed to the complete river diagram array. Back then, Master had said that if anyone could complete the complete river diagram array, then they would have the qualifications to become his disciple. "Follow me." The divine turtle's voice resounded in Zhuowen's mind. He knew that this was the divine turtle's voice transmission. Soon after, he saw the divine turtle slowly walking in front of him. It bent down and gestured for him to stand on its turtle shell. Although this unforeseen event was a little dramatic, Zhuowen was not too surprised. Long ago, when Mu Feng's strange attitude towards him, he already knew that the complete river diagram array on his body would definitely play an important role in the Emperor's tomb. Now everything was clear. This role was related to the inheritance of the Emperor's tomb's master. The divine turtle's speed was extremely fast. It was like a bolt of lightning in the pool. In about half an incense stick's time, it reached the bottom of the pool. This array of the Book of Luo is really mysterious. It's like a maze trapping people in the pool. While the divine turtle was moving, Zhuowen was constantly paying attention to his surroundings. Soon after, he realized that every time the divine turtle moved, it would follow a specific path. Although it seemed messy and disorderly, it actually contained a trace of a special pattern. He knew that the divine turtle's steps should be the method to break out of the array of the Book of Luo. At the bottom of the pool, there were pieces of black reef. Upon closer inspection, there were traces of buildings on these reef. Perhaps a long time ago, these were the remains of a building. The divine turtle landed in front of a tower-like reef. The surface of this reef was covered with dark green seaweed and moss. Its surface revealed a trace of an ancient aura. Zhuowen stepped down from the turtle shell. His gaze landed on this reef. Only now did he see that this reef was actually a tall tower. However, because the surface was covered with moss, it looked like a reef. At the bottom of this tower, there was an arched stone door. However, at this moment, the stone door was tightly shut. The divine turtle pointed at the stone door and said in a deep voice, "Human, this is the Tower of Trials set up by my master. If you can pass through the Tower of Trials, my master's inheritance will be yours. Also, before you enter, you have to tell me your name first." Zhuowen said indifferently. Then, he continued, I can pass through the Tower of Trials to obtain the inheritance? Not necessarily. It depends on your performance inside. If you can achieve a satisfactory performance, even if you don't pass, you'll still be qualified to receive the inheritance. It all depends on your performance, the Black Tortoise said calmly. Since it's a trial, there should be a certain degree of danger, right? Zhuowen asked indifferently. The Divine Turtle nodded and said, Of course. You were able to draw the complete river diagram array. This has already proven your talent. If you can't even pass through the Tower of Trials, then it can only be said that you drew the river diagram array by luck. Towards such a trial taker with a fluke mentality, my master will naturally not be kind. He will kill all of them. You're on your own now. Chapter 1281. The human body has secrets. Since you were able to draw the river diagram array, it means that you are fated with my master. However, if you want to obtain my master's inheritance, you still have to pay a certain price. The Divine Turtle glanced at Zhuowen and continued, Of course, if you feel that this trial is too cruel, you can give up. I won't force you. Zhuowen immediately shook his head. What a joke. He had snatched the opportunity to enter the pool from Mu Feng with great difficulty. Moreover, this was the inheritance of the Master of the Emperor's Tomb, an arcane Saint Master. How could he give it up? Since that's the case, you can go in. The Divine Turtle revealed a gratified expression as he spoke to Zhuowen. Nodding his head, Zhuowen did not hesitate. He took a step forward and arrived in front of the arched door. Of course, this arched door was closed. Therefore, he immediately looked at the Divine Turtle. Place your hand on the surface of the stone door. I will guide you into the trial tower. The Divine Turtle's indifferent voice continued to ring out. Zhuowen naturally did as he was told. Instantly, a wave of spatial energy spread out from the arched door and enveloped Zhuowen's entire body. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared outside the door. I say, little turtle, this Zhuowen is the first person in 1,000 years to complete the river diagram. Aren't you being a little too unreasonable by letting him enter the trial tower? Not long after Zhuowen disappeared, an illusory voice rang out in this space. The moment this voice rang out, the Divine Turtle's expression became a little angry. You damned fellow! How many times have I told you, don't call me little turtle? The Black Tortoise, who had always been indifferent, revealed a furious expression. It was a sharp contrast from before. If Zhuowen were here to see the Black Tortoise in this state, he would definitely be stunned. Since you don't like little turtle, I'll call you little turtle, or little silly turtle. With our relationship, we naturally need to call each other intimately. The illusory voice rang out again, causing the Divine Turtle's head to be filled with black lines. He gritted his teeth but could not do anything. After all, he knew that the owner of this voice was much more powerful than him. He did not dare to provoke him. Ha ha! I won't tease you anymore. Can you tell me the reason why you let that little fellow enter the Tower of Trials? Perhaps it had sensed the helpless expression on the Black Tortoise's face, but the ethereal voice became cautious. Humph! Master had indeed said that so long as someone was able to perfect the river diagram, then that person would be able to obtain his inheritance. But didn't you notice that the little guy's river diagram was engraved on a broken jade cauldron? The Black Tortoise also became serious. You mean that jade cauldron is the legendary? At this point, the ethereal voice suddenly stopped, as if it was afraid of something. Yes. It's very likely that it's that thing, the thing that Master couldn't find even after searching all over the world. The Black Tortoise said softly. If it's really that thing, then you should let this little guy accept your master's inheritance. At that time, he might be able to bring your master's inheritance to greater heights, the ethereal voice said in a low voice. The Black Tortoise shook his head and said, It's because this little guy has that thing on him that I'm even more cautious. I want to see if this little guy has the qualifications to possess something that even my master didn't have back then. I remember that your master stayed in the Tower of Trials for 49 days before coming out, right? Do you think that this little guy will surpass your master's results? The ethereal voice asked with interest. This little guy's spiritual talent is not bad, but I feel that it's still slightly inferior to my master's. Perhaps passing the Tower of Trials shouldn't be too much of a problem, but the time taken will definitely surpass my master's 49 days, the Black Tortoise said confidently. Looks like you have a lot of confidence in your master. When the time comes, let's see how long this little fellow will take to complete the training. After the illusory voice finished speaking, it slowly disappeared without a trace. The Black Tortoise looked around. Although the voice was now silent, it knew that the fellow had been paying attention to this place. The moment Zhuowen opened his eyes, he suddenly realized that he was in front of a rather monotonous stone wall. This stone wall was 10 feet long and 5 feet tall, and its surface was engraved with densely packed words. At a glance, even Zhuowen felt a little dazzled. The human body has a secret, and it contains the universe within. It can connect heaven and earth, and it can enter the 9 underworlds. Elemental energy enters the meridians, and spiritual energy hides in the Naiwen. If the two are combined, then immortal energy can be created. When Zhuowen's gaze landed on the first line of the stone wall, his expression froze. Especially the third line, elemental energy enters the meridians, and spiritual energy hides in the Naiwen. If the two are combined, immortal energy can be created. It really shocked Zhuowen. When Zhuowen slowly read down, the shock on his face was immediately replaced by ecstasy. This was because the content of the words engraved on the stone wall was actually a method to combine the elemental energy in the meridians and spiritual energy in the Naiwen Palace to create a powerful immortal energy. The first time Zhuowen came into contact with immortal energy was naturally the immortal stone that he obtained from the Azura Island auction. The immortal stone contained a special array that could combine spiritual energy and elemental energy and transform them into immortal energy. Moreover, Zhuowen, who had used immortal energy before, naturally knew how powerful immortal energy was. It was far more powerful than elemental energy. No matter if it was a cultivation technique or an emperor weapon, with the support of immortal energy, its power would definitely increase by more than a few times. However, the array in the immortal stone was incomplete, so there was a limit to the number of times it could be used in a day. However, the method described on the stone wall was completely different from the principle of the immortal stone. The immortal stone could be said to be a kind of foreign medium, but in fact, the human body could also be used as a medium to continuously combine the spiritual energy and elemental energy in the body to form a new power, immortal energy. If the cultivation was successful, immortal energy could completely replace elemental energy and spiritual energy, becoming the newest and most powerful source of energy for a cultivator. It was unlike elemental energy and spiritual energy, which had to be used separately. This was because the content engraved on the stone wall mentioned that immortal energy could be used like elemental energy in battle, and like spiritual energy, it could also be used to engrave arrays and display various arcanist techniques. In other words, if one really completely combined the spiritual energy and elemental energy in the body into immortal energy, not only would one's battle strength be much stronger than elemental energy, but one would also be much more efficient in arcana technique. Moreover, it was also mentioned that if one wanted to become an arcana saint master, the minimum requirement was to have immortal energy in the body. Otherwise, there would be no hope of becoming an arcana saint master. Within a month's time, completely comprehend the content on the stone wall and combine it with a trace of immortal energy. You will pass. If you fail, you will be obliterated. The indifferent voice echoed in the tower, causing Zhuowen's eyes to narrow slightly. It seemed that what the black turtle said before was not baseless. If he really failed, there might really be danger to his life. Moreover, when he entered the Tower of Trials, he discovered that there were a total of 3 levels in the tower. This was only the first level, and it already required him to cultivate immortal energy. He wondered what the next 2 levels were for. If we're talking about immortal energy, I'm not a newborn calf. However, Zhuowen smiled. He was not too worried about the so-called punishment because it was not the first time he came into contact with immortal energy. He had even used it many times. In terms of understanding of immortal energy, he was even more profound than some old fellows. Moreover, there was a complete cultivation method of immortal energy on the stone wall. 1 month's time, to Zhuowen, could be said to be extremely ample. Thinking of this, Zhuowen took out the immortal stone and silently felt the operating principle of the strange array in the immortal stone. As he comprehended the cultivation method on the stone wall, he entered into a meditative state. 3 days later, Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes. The corners of his mouth curled up. He slowly stretched out his right hand. In the center of his palm, there was a trace of milky white light. This milky white light was immortal energy. Moreover, it was not immortal energy produced by the immortal stone. Instead, it was transformed by Zhuowen himself. Right now, I'm only at the preliminary stage. I can only integrate a trace of immortal energy. However, it's enough, muttered Zhuowen softly. As expected, just as he finished speaking, a spatial energy wrapped around Zhuowen, causing him to instantly disappear in front of the stone wall. When Zhuowen opened his eyes again, the stone wall had already disappeared. In its place was a huge stone hall. Around the stone hall were 4 huge pale white flames. The white flames spread out and illuminated the stone hall. At this moment, outside the Tower of Trials, the divine turtle was silently lying on the ground. A pair of indifferent eyes quietly stared at the Tower of Trials. This brat passed the first level? It's only been 3 days. Perhaps it had discovered something. The divine turtle suddenly stood up and stared at the second level of the Tower of Trials that had already lit up. This light meant that the person inside had already reached the second level. Little turtle, this brat only used 3 days to pass the first level. I remember that back then, your master used 9 days to pass the Tower of Trials. This brat's speed is 3 times faster than your master's. Haha. The moment the divine tortoise stood up, the illusory voice rang out once again. Even though the voice was uninhibited, if one listened carefully, one could still hear a hint of surprise in it. Obviously, this illusory voice was also quite surprised that Zhuowen had passed the first level in 3 days. This is only the first level. The second and third levels are very difficult. They can't be passed in a short time. The divine turtle coldly snorted and lay on the ground again. Then let's wait and see. Chapter 1282. 4-kill formation. The reason why he paid attention to the ceiling as soon as he entered the stone hall was because there were pieces of special patterns engraved on the ceiling. These patterns are all formation diagrams? Zhuowen muttered softly as he raised his head and looked at the ceiling with some astonishment. The core of an origin formation set up by an arcanist was naturally the formation diagram. If the formation diagram was set up, one only needed to arrange origin crystals on top of the formation diagram to form a powerful origin formation. Formation diagrams required an arcanist to use their mind power and spend a lot of effort to draw them out. Zhuowen's ultimate sword formation diagram was something that Master Lan Miao had spent a lot of time to successfully draw out. Formation diagrams were secrets that many arcanists did not pass on. Although Zhuowen had obtained some origin formations, he did not understand the principles behind them at all. However, Zhuowen had previously studied with Grandmaster Lan Miao for a period of time. Hence, he had some knowledge about the outline of a formation. Therefore, after seeing the pattern at the top of the hall, he immediately recognized that it was a yuan formation. There were also some words carved around the formation diagrams. They were densely packed like tadpoles. As Zhuowen read, Zhuowen's eyes grew brighter and brighter. This was because the words introduced how to use immortal energy to draw formation diagrams. According to the introduction of these words, using immortal energy to draw formation diagrams was much more efficient than using mind power. If one was skilled enough, they could even use immortal energy to instantly set up formation diagrams and use the power of formation Dao to kill enemies. Although Zhuowen was a rank 6 arcanist, he had never thought of using immortal energy to instantly set up formation diagrams and use formation Dao to kill enemies. Zhuowen gradually understood. The first level of the Tower of Trials allowed one to cultivate immortal energy on their own. It could be considered a kind of foundation for immortal energy cultivation. The second level allowed one to practice immortal energy and use it to draw formation diagrams and kill enemies. Zhuowen could faintly feel that this trial actually contained a trace of inheritance. After all, even a fool would know that the method of cultivating immortal energy was extremely precious. This kind of method was simply unheard of in the outside world, and had never been seen before. In other words, when he stepped into the Tower of Trials, the inheritance of the Tomb Master had already begun. However, the punishment of the Tower of Trials was indeed very cruel. If one could not complete it, they would be killed immediately. If one did not have enough talent and was unable to comprehend the immortal energy, the Tower of Trials would not be an opportunity but a calamity. Use your immortal energy to draw out any perfect formation diagram. You have a time limit of 1 month. If you exceed the time limit, you will be killed immediately. The same cold voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen nodded his head, but his gaze was fixed on the mural at the top. There were a total of 4 array diagrams on it, and each array diagram was extremely profound. If they were to be drawn, their power would be extraordinary. These 4 diagrams naturally had names. They were the slaughter diagram, the absolute slaughter diagram, and the annihilation diagram. These 4 diagrams were arranged in 4 different directions to form the 4 kills diagram. The 4 kills diagram consisted of 4 smaller diagrams, and each diagram alone was able to display great power. If the 4 diagrams were to be combined together to form the 4 kills diagram, then its power would be tens or even hundreds of times stronger than the individual diagrams. Its power was vast and mighty, like the might of the heavens. Zhuowen's demonic doppelganger cultivated the slaughter demonic Dao, so he had a certain understanding of the 4 kills diagram. However, what he lacked now was to use his immortal energy, which he was not very familiar with, to draw out at least one of the diagrams. This could be considered as his main problem. The first diagram he chose was the slaughter diagram. His eyes were filled with seriousness, and at the same time, he operated the mental energy in his Naiwen Palace and the elemental energy in his meridians. The 2 types of energy gathered in his body, forming a milky white immortal energy that appeared in his palm. Zhuowen condensed the immortal energy at his fingertips, and soon after, he began to draw slowly in front of him. According to the pattern of the slaughter diagram, stroke by stroke, the diagram intertwined in the void. When the diagram was a quarter complete, a gust of slaughter intent burst out from the diagram. Zhuowen was caught off guard, and directly retreated dozens of steps. His chest was heaving up and down, and his blood and qi were boiling. Failed. He frowned slightly. He had clearly drawn according to the slaughter diagram, but when he drew a quarter of the diagram, it actually failed and shattered. It's because your celestial qi isn't enough to support the entire slaughtering formation. That's why the slaughtering formation failed when it was only a quarter of the way through. Blackie's voice suddenly rang out, causing Zhuowen to have a look of understanding. Continue to draw, I don't believe that I will fail. Zhuowen gritted his teeth and did not give up. He continued to condense his immortal energy, and continued to draw in the void. The second time, he still failed when he drew a quarter of the diagram. After the second failure, Zhuowen continued to try. The third failure, the fourth failure, on the 10th attempt, Zhuowen's immortal energy actually increased a little in the process of desperately drawing the diagram. For the first time, it broke through a quarter, and he actually drew half of the diagram before it failed and shattered. When he found that his immortal energy continued to increase after failing, Zhuowen's eyes shone with unprecedented brilliance, and he continued to draw the slaughter diagram with all his might. In the process of practicing the slaughter diagram without any regard for his life, he became more proficient in the cultivation of immortal energy, and the reserve of immortal energy in his body also became more profound. While Zhuowen was practicing the slaughter diagram in the trial tower, the sea of misery outside the monarch's tomb had completely calmed down. After the demon god array led by Yao Dai drove away the heavenly insect clone, they did not return to the monarch's tomb, but returned to the auspicious god island. After all, they had destroyed the heavenly insects' plan to invade the sea of misery and absorb the energy of the cultivator's flesh and blood. If they returned to the monarch's tomb now, they would definitely suffer the heavenly insects' revenge. After all, the heavenly insects' power in the monarch's tomb was the strongest. Mo Yen and Bai Yen naturally welcomed Yao Dai and the rest of the demon soldiers to the auspicious god island, and even treated them with great hospitality. After all, this was a group of demon emperors, and Yao Dai was even stronger, comparable to a high-level emperor. At this moment, on the other side of the auspicious god island, a rather large sailboat quietly floated above the sea of misery. This sailboat was called the Skypiercer, and it was Mo Yen and Bai Yan's own flying monarch weapon. Its speed was not much slower than Mu Feng's sun shuttle. At this moment, Mo Yen, Bai Yan and Zhuowen quietly stood in front of the Skypiercer, and behind them was a group of outer court students. They all stared at Zhuowen and Bai Yan with reverence in their eyes. Behind Zhuowen, the Lord of Grand Demons, Lu Hantian, Lv Yitao, Luo Xing and Qing Lian silently followed. Beside Mo Yen and Bai Yan were Moyan Wushang and Qing Yin. Among them, Lv Yitao, Luo Xing and Qing Lian had all broken through to the Emperor realm after absorbing the heart of imperial power. Zhuowen was quite pleased with this. Wushang and Qing Yin have absorbed the heart of imperial power and have advanced to the Emperor realm. At that time, they will have the qualifications to become an official disciple of the inner court. Mo Yen and Bai Yan glanced at Moyan Wushang and Qing Yin behind them, and said to Zhuowen with a smile. Zhuowen nodded. However, he looked at the group of students behind him and said, "Principal, I'll bring a few people with me to the 9th Netherworld realm this time. Is that okay?" Mo Yen and Bai Yan curled their lips and said, "I understand what you mean. Jia Nan and Gatha have impressive armor souls, and they've also absorbed the heart of imperial power. If they enter the inner court, they'll probably have a limitless future. As for Mo Lingtian, he's quite talented as well. There's no doubt that he'll advance to the Emperor realm." "Thank you, Principal." Zhuowen looked grateful. Then, he waved at the crowd. Jianan, Gatha and Mo Lingtian walked over excitedly. Jianan had already reached the peak of the Heavenly Master realm, and was almost on par with Mo Lingtian. However, Gatha was extremely terrifying. She had actually reached the Emperor realm. Zhuowen couldn't help but sigh inwardly at how heaven-defying the Heaven's Wrath armor soul was. It actually allowed Gatha to cultivate so quickly. He knew that back then, Gatha's cultivation was slightly weaker than his. Now, there wasn't much difference between them. Moreover, if Gatha released the Heaven's Wrath armor soul, her battle strength would be terrifying. She could be comparable to a mid-level emperor. Moreover, as her cultivation deepened, Gatha would also unearth more powerful abilities of the Heaven's Wrath armor soul. Xian Xing didn't come? Zhuowen suddenly asked Mo Lingtian. Back then, because Xian Xing was too weak, he couldn't pass through the Black Storm. Therefore, he returned to Jiaozhen Island and avoided the calamity of the heavenly insect clone. Mo Lingtian smiled bitterly when he heard Zhuowen's question. Xian Xing knows that his cultivation isn't enough. He doesn't plan to follow us to the 9th netherworld realm. Zhuowen nodded. Xian Xing's talent was indeed ordinary. He couldn't keep up with everyone's pace in the outer court. If he entered the inner court, the gap between them would only grow. Xian Xing's decision was clearly very wise. I want to go too. Not far away, Wu Dai, who was following beside Yao Dai, suddenly had tears in her eyes. She stared at Zhuowen with her big watery eyes. Her voice was choked with sobs. Zhuowen tilted his head. His gaze first landed on Yao Dai. When he saw the increasingly dense aura of death between Yao Dai's brows and the pleading look in her eyes, he let out a low sigh. He smiled at Yao Dai and said, "Little Dai, your Aunt Yao still has some things that she needs you to do. You should accompany her more during this period of time. When my main body comes out, I will bring you to the 9 netherworld realm." Wu Dai looked at Yao Dai, who had a hopeful look in her eyes, and a trace of sadness rose in her heart. Although she had just become a demon emperor and her mind was still a little pure, it didn't mean that she was stupid. She could naturally see that Yao Dai didn't have much time left. Although she was reluctant to part with Zhuowen, she also knew that Yao Dai, who was in her twilight years, needed her more at this moment. "Okay. Master, when your real body comes out, you must bring me there. Otherwise, I won't be polite." As she spoke, Wu Dai waved her fist at Zhuowen. The blush on her cheeks made Wu Dai appear rather cute at this moment. Zhuowen slowly walked in front of Wu Dai and stretched out his right hand to gently rub her head. He softly said, "Don't worry, Master will definitely bring you there." As he spoke, Zhuowen turned around and stepped into the cloud-piercing sail. "Set sail." The instant Zhuowen stepped onto the deck, Mo Yen and Bai Yen shouted. Standing at the bow of the ship, Yuan power poured into the controller in his right hand. Immediately, the cloud-piercing sail shot out, turning into a shadow and disappearing before everyone's eyes. Wu Dai's beautiful eyes stared blankly into the distance. Her eyes were filled with absent-mindedness. After a long while, her cheeks turned even redder, almost like a ripe red apple. This moment of flirtatiousness stunned countless cultivators on the shore. "Little Dai, your master has already left. Let's go." Yao Dai naturally noticed the expression on Wu Dai's face, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. How could she not see that Wu Dai's feelings for Zhuowen were unusual? However, she also acknowledged Zhuowen. The strength and talent that the latter had displayed were definitely not inferior to her previous master. Chapter 1283. The Third Floor. 10 days gradually passed. On the second floor of the trial pagoda, Zhuowen's hands danced in the air, drawing a mystical path. The path contained the Tao of slaughter. Zhuowen seemed to have sunk into a state where he forgot himself as he slowly stepped forward. His hands moved in sync with his footsteps, and he used his hand as a brush. Milky white celestial power gushed out from his fingertips, and the outline of the slaughtering array gradually floated to the surface of the water. The last stroke. Suddenly, Zhuowen came to a stop. He raised his head and glanced at the outline of the slaughter formation in the air. Following this, he tapped with his right hand. Bang! When Zhuowen drew the final stroke, a terrifying slaughter intent exploded in the entire space. It was like a volcano erupting, unstoppable. In the air, countless murderous sword shadows emerged from the slaughter formation. Each sword shadow was accompanied by a strong murderous aura, giving it a terrifying appearance. The slaughter formation is done. Zhuowen's eyes flickered fiercely. He could not help but grin. It's quite impressive that you've managed to draw the slaughter formation in 10 days. Kid, try and see if you can draw the other 3 formations, Xiao He urged all of a sudden. Zhuowen nodded. His eyes flickered with confidence. As he was drawing the slaughter formation, the immortal force in his body continued to grow. It was a lot stronger than before. Soon, his gaze landed on the second array diagram, the killing array diagram. Zhuowen pointed with his right hand and slowly drew the outline of the slaughtering formation diagram. However, when he had drawn 2/3 of the diagram, a frightening slaughtering intent rushed out from the slaughtering formation diagram. It was as if a 10,000-foot-tall mountain was crushing down, causing Zhuo Wen's hands to involuntarily stop. Bang! The incomplete killing array diagram instantly shattered and dissipated, while Zhuo Wen frowned slightly. Slaughter, slaughter, extermination, and extermination. Looks like each diagram is more complicated than the last. With my current immortal force, it's really slightly difficult to draw out the outline of this second diagram. Zhuo Wen muttered in a low voice. Try using the immortal energy fused with the immortal stone. This Dragon Lord can feel that the immortal energy fused with the immortal stone is much purer than the immortal energy you are currently cultivating. Perhaps it might be able to draw the outline of the remaining 3 formation diagrams. Xiao He suddenly reminded. Zhuo Wen's eyes lit up when he heard this, and he said, "You're right. I actually forgot about the immortal stone." After all, Zhuo Wen had only recently grasped the cultivation method of immortal energy, so the immortal energy he condensed naturally couldn't be too pure. On the other hand, it was obvious that the immortal stone came from the hands of a powerful arcana master, and the formation within it was extremely complicated. Even Zhuo Wen couldn't quite understand it. The immortal energy he fused with it would definitely be much purer and more powerful than the current Zhuo Wen, who was a layman. Thinking of this, he took out the immortal stone and began to fuse his mental strength and origin energy into the immortal energy through the immortal stone. Then, he began to draw the killing formation diagram stroke by stroke. At this moment, outside the training tower, the black tortoise stared in shock at the second level of the training tower that was surging with boundless killing intent. He muttered in a low voice, "This kid has already drawn the killing formation diagram of the 4 kills formation diagram so quickly? It's only been 10 days. This kid is a good seedling. He only used 3 days to comprehend the immortal energy on the first level. On the second level, he only used 10 days to complete the killing formation diagram of the 4 kills formation diagram. This result is much better than your master's, right?" The ethereal voice sounded again. The black tortoise didn't reply to the ethereal voice. Instead, his gaze fell on the training tower, and he said in a deep voice, "The most crucial part of the training tower is the 3rd level. If he can also take more time than my master on the 3rd level, I will admit that this kid's talent is indeed above my master's." "Haha. I say, little turtle, looks like you really can't forget about your master. The result is actually very obvious. I'm guessing that this kid won't take too long to pass through the 3rd level." The illusory voice laughed out loud. "Don't call me little tortoise, you be **starred. The black tortoise roared in anger. "Why hasn't that kid entered the 3rd level yet?" Suddenly, the ethereal voice sounded with a hint of surprise. The black tortoise came back to his senses and noticed the light spot that was still on the 2nd level. Perhaps he thought of something, and he said in a strange tone, "This kid can't be planning to draw the 4 kills formation diagram, right?" "That's possible." The ethereal voice was silent for a while before it spoke. The black tortoise had a mocking look in his eyes, and he said indifferently, "This kid is overestimating himself. The 4 kills formation diagram is divided into the killing formation, the killing formation, the killing formation, and the killing formation. Among them, the killing formation diagram is the simplest formation diagram. The killing formation diagram is the most complicated formation diagram. It's already good that he can draw the killing formation diagram, but it's very difficult to draw the other formation diagrams." And you're right. The killing array diagram is much more difficult than the killing array diagram. That little fellow's ambition is a little too big. However, after he suffers a little, he will give up on the 4 kills array diagram and directly enter the 3rd level, the illusory voice said in agreement. Boom. However, the indistinct voice hadn't finished resounding out when strands of the profundities of slaughter suddenly erupted from the 2nd level of the Pagoda of Trials. It was as if the entire second level had transformed into a battlefield where slaughter shot into the sky without end. Sensing the murderous intent that soared into the sky, the black tortoise was stunned. The ethereal voice was also completely frozen. The killing formation diagram has been drawn? This kid. The black tortoise's limbs trembled and he almost fell to the ground from the shock. Not long after the killing ultimacy appeared, the killing ultimacy and killing ultimacy also erupted from the second level. At this moment, the 4 kills formation diagram was completely drawn on the second level of the trial tower. Even the black tortoise, who was outside the trial tower, could clearly feel the powerful killing ultimacy from the second level. This. The black tortoise suddenly realized that he was completely at a loss for words. He did not know how to express his feelings at that moment. Not long after the killing formation diagram was set up, this kid immediately set up the remaining killing formation, the killing formation, and the killing formation one after another to form the 4 kills formation. Little tortoise, do you think that this kid's talent is not as good as your master's? The ethereal voice paused for a moment before it suddenly burst with excitement as it spoke to the black tortoise. Sigh. This kid's talent is indeed terrifying. It's natural for him to receive my master's inheritance. The black tortoise sighed softly as a glimmer of light appeared in his eyes. He had been guarding this place for a long time and naturally hoped that his master's inheritor would be a unique genius. Not only was Zhuowen able to perfect the river diagram formation, but he was also able to use the immortal power that he had just cultivated to set up the 4 kills formation in a short period of time. This was definitely a one-of-a-kind demonic existence. Perhaps after this kid received his master's inheritance, he would definitely be able to bring it to greater height. Let's look forward to this kid's performance on the 3rd level. The ethereal voice laughed and fell silent. In the stone temple, Zhuowen silently stared at the 4 formation diagrams in the void with a hint of astonishment in his eyes. He did not expect that the immortal power that was fused from the immortal stone could be used to outline the remaining 3 formation diagrams so easily. It seems that the immortal power that was fused from the immortal stone is much higher than the one in your body now. Xiao He clicked his tongue in wonder. Zhuowen nodded, but his gaze fell on the 4 kills formation. He said, "The power of this 4 kills formation is terrifying. If a living creature is unfortunate enough to fall into this formation, it will definitely be crushed into pieces by the killing intent within. Perhaps even its soul and nascent soul will not be able to escape." The 4 kills array only appeared in the void for a short while before it dissipated. Zhuowen, on the other hand, was stunned. After all, the immortal power of the immortal stone is limited. Your 4 kills formation cannot be maintained for too long. Unless the quality of the immortal power in your body is comparable to the immortal power that was fused with the immortal stone, it will be very difficult to maintain the 4 kills formation. Xiao He continued. I see. It seems that I still have a very long way to go on the path of immortal power. Now that I have met the requirements of the 2nd level, I think I should be able to enter the 3rd level, right? Sure enough, as soon as Zhuowen finished speaking, a force of space filled the air and Zhuowen immediately disappeared from the spot. When Zhuowen slowly opened his eyes, he found that he was on a white jade stone bridge that was suspended in the air. On both sides of the stone bridge was an endless void. In the distance, countless stars were scattered all over the void, emitting a faint starlight. I wonder what kind of trial is on the 3rd level? Looking around, Zhuowen found that other than the endless void and stars, the only special thing about this place was the white jade stone bridge beneath his feet. However, the white jade stone bridge was suspended in the void without a beginning or end. He did not know where the stone bridge began or ended. Whoosh! While Zhuowen was observing the surroundings of the white jade stone bridge, in the center of the white jade stone bridge, wisps of starlight filled the air and turned into a tall and straight figure. This was a young man about the same age as Zhuowen. He wore a long green robe, held a feather fan in his hand, and wore a silk headband on his head. He looked like a scholar with a mind full of wisdom. This person gently waved the feather fan and smiled at Zhuowen. He said, "Congratulations on entering the 3rd level of the Tower of Trials. The trial on the 3rd level is actually very simple. You just have to use the immortal power and array Dao that you comprehended on the first 2 levels to attack me. If you can pass by me on the White Jade Stone Bridge, you will pass the 3rd level." Use array Dao to attack you? Zhuowen was stunned. He'd never used the formation Dao to attack. However, he knew that immortal force could instantly set up formation diagrams. So if he possessed immortal force, he could indeed rely on the energy of the formation Dao to fight. However, he had only just come into contact with immortal power and had not experienced actual combat. Therefore, when this person proposed this method of fighting, he could not help but be startled. "Ha! Since you don't plan to attack first, then I will. Remember, your life and death are up to the heavens. If you are killed by me, you can't blame anyone else. Do you understand?" Chapter 1284. 100 Beasts Array. 100 Beasts Array. In an instant, the young man had formed the outline of a huge array. Hundreds of beasts appeared in the array and roared towards the sky. Their roars were shrill and the sound waves were powerful enough to shake one's soul. Tiger. The moment the 100 Beasts array was formed, the young man tapped his feather fan again. Instantly, a huge tiger leaped out of the 100 Beasts array. It roared and charged towards Zhuowen. Massacre array. Zhuowen's eyes turned solemn. He took a step forward and the mental energy and yuan power in his body surged crazily. They merged into a powerful immortal power. Using his hand as a brush, he drew out many tracks in the air and formed a huge massacre array. Shadows of slaughter swords appeared in the array and looked extremely terrifying. Puff! The moment the tiger formed by the power of the array came into contact with the massacre array, it was annihilated by the countless slaughter sword shadows. Not bad. To pass the 2nd level of the trial tower, one must be able to form at least one array. Since you have chosen the simplest massacre array, it will not be easy for you to pass my test. The young man smiled faintly. His expression did not change even when the tiger was annihilated. It was as if everything was under his control. Lion, wolf, eagle, sparrow, crocodile. As he spoke, the young man waved his right hand. Instantly, huge beasts flew out of the 100 Beasts array. They bared their fangs and brandished their claws. Their ferocious aura filled the sky. Every single one of them was not simple. No wonder it is called the 100 Beasts array. Using the power of the array to create all kinds of beasts and ferocious beasts, the power produced is actually so strong. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and did not dare to be careless. He tapped with both his hands and the power of the massacre array grew stronger. The slaughter sword shadows contained an endless amount of slaughter aura. They turned into a blood-red vortex that appeared in the sky. A foul wind blew as if the blood-red vortex contained an endless amount of slaughter. Boom! 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 The 100 beasts flew over and collided with the blood-red vortex. The powerful force caused the entire sky to tremble. Terrifying energy waves spread out and cracks appeared in the sky. Thud, thud, thud. As soon as they collided, Zhuowen's slaughter array fell into a disadvantageous position, and it kept retreating. The slaughtering array is too weak. You will definitely lose. The young man spat out these words indifferently. He pointed his feather fan at the void and actually summoned the shadow of a ferocious beast that was over 1,000 feet long. This ferocious beast was shaped like a tiger with a pair of wings on its back. It had a pair of sharp fangs and emitted a cold light. Let Qiongqi play with you for a while. This game is about to end. The young man waved his feather fan, and the enormous Qiongqi spread its wings and shot out like a bolt of black lightning. Its large fan-like claws seemed to tear through space as it heavily slammed into the killing array. Rumble! when the terrifying power came crashing down, it actually caused the massacre array to tremble violently. Zhuowen was even more shocked to discover that traces of cracks had begun to appear on the surface of the array. What a terrifying power! Zhuowen waved his right hand and hurriedly retreated with the massacre array. However, Qiongqi naturally would not let Zhuowen off so easily. It led the 100 beasts behind it and charged forward in a mighty manner. Looks like I have to use the slaughtering array. Looking at Qiongqi and the 100 beasts that were chasing after him, Zhuowen knew that the weakest slaughtering array of the 4-kill array would not be able to deal with them. He flipped his right hand and took out an ordinary celestial stone. Soon after, he condensed an even purer and more powerful celestial energy. While continuously retreating, Zhuowen's right hand formed a sword finger. The powerful celestial energy that was condensed from the celestial stone emitted an extremely rich milky white light. Soon after, his right hand slowly drew an outline in the void. Instantly, a wave of slaughtering energy gushed out. Behind the slaughtering energy, there were countless figures with weapons in their hands as they fought against each other. Their battle intent soared to the heavens and could split metal and stone. Slaughtering array! Come out! Zhuowen roared furiously as the slaughtering array formed in the void. Immediately, countless figures with weapons in their hands stepped forward. The sound of war drums resounded from the slaughtering array. It was mighty and rather ear-piercing. Bang! Suddenly, Qiongqi, who was leading the 100 beasts, was blocked halfway by the slaughtering array. Numerous figures lined up in the void as slaughtering energy gushed out from each other. Their battle intent soared to the heavens. Slaughtering array? Apart from comprehending the slaughtering array, this guy has also comprehended the second slaughtering array? The moment the slaughtering array appeared, the young man's gaze froze. His right hand that was holding the feather fan almost lost its grip. Naturally, he knew that there were a total of 4 slaughtering array on the second floor. They were the slaughtering array, exterminating array, and exterminating array. These 4 slaughtering array formed the 4 slaughtering array. Being able to use celestial energy to draw 1 slaughtering array was already very impressive. Being able to draw 2 slaughtering array was already considered a genius. As for being able to draw 4 slaughtering array to form the 4 slaughtering array, the young man had never seen it before. In his opinion, for a warrior who had just started cultivating celestial energy, the probability of drawing the 4 slaughtering array was almost impossible. It could even be said that being able to draw 2 slaughtering array consecutively was already considered extremely monstrous. After all, every warrior who had entered the training tower did not understand celestial energy at all. They had just come into contact with celestial energy not long ago. Moreover, for some warriors who had mastered celestial energy, it was not that easy to draw the 4 slaughtering array completely. After all, the power of the 4 slaughtering array was indeed terrifying. If one did not have a thorough understanding of slaughtering Tao, it would not be that easy to draw the slaughtering array. However, Zhuowen was able to draw 2 slaughtering array consecutively. When the slaughtering array and exterminating array were combined, the power that erupted would be extremely terrifying. Kill! The moment the slaughtering array blocked the Qiongqi and the 100 beasts, Zhuowen's right hand pointed at the slaughtering array. Suddenly, the slaughtering sword shadows swept out and merged with the slaughtering array. The countless figures and weapons in the slaughtering array were immediately replaced by the slaughtering sword shadows. Boom! The slaughtering array and exterminating array were combined. The killing intent soared into the sky. Clouds that looked like blood appeared in the sky, looking extremely terrifying. Countless figures swept out and directly clashed with the Qiongqi and the 100 beasts. Puff, puff. The power of the combination of the slaughtering array and exterminating array was many times stronger than before. When the 2 of them clashed, the 100 beasts fell one after another. Blood filled the entire white jade stone bridge. Slash! Zhuowen took a step forward with the slaughtering array and exterminating array. In an instant, he was in front of the Qiong-Qi ferocious beast. Billowing slaughtering array energy violently blasted out from his right fist and heavily hit the Qiong-Qi ferocious beast. Bang! The Qiong-Qi ferocious beast let out a wail and quickly retreated until it was above the young man. Its aura had become extremely weak. Zhuowen did not show any mercy. He took a step forward and stretched out his right hand. He suddenly pressed down. The power of the two slaughtering arrays poured out and completely enveloped the Qiong-Qi ferocious beast and the young man. Puff! Without a doubt, the Qiong-Qi ferocious beast died a violent death. The young man's hands surged with celestial energy and formed a defensive array in front of him. It temporarily blocked the attack of the slaughtering array and exterminating array. However, it looked like he was struggling under the attack of the two slaughtering arrays. "You've lost this round." Zhuowen lightly spat out these words. He pointed out his right hand again, and a purer celestial energy swept out from the celestial stone. Instantly, Zhuowen started to draw the slaughtering array again. Exterminating array? When Zhuowen completed the last stroke, an extremely terrifying aura filled the slaughtering array. It contained an aura of despair. This was the power of the exterminating array. The young man's eyes were wide open and he was completely stunned. Zhuowen could still draw the third slaughtering array. Wasn't this a little too terrifying? Being able to draw two diagrams consecutively at the initial stage of coming into contact with immortal energy, he defined the person as a monster. Then, being able to draw 3 diagrams consecutively would make him a peerless monster. Originally, in his opinion, such a peerless monster would be hard to come by, but now, he actually encountered one. Slaughtering array, and exterminating array. Kill! Zhuowen roared angrily and 3 huge, slaughtering arrays appeared behind him. Surges of ultimacy of slaughter surged into his body, causing his robe and hair to flutter wildly. He looked like a god of slaughter descending upon the world. Bang! The defensive array in front of the young man was directly shattered. In the face of the slaughtering aura, he was forced to retreat dozens of steps. The figure formed by starlight seemed to have dimmed a lot. "I've lost. Congratulations on completing the 3rd level of the trial." The young man stopped near the white jade stone bridge. His eyes were slightly dim, but there was no trace of resentment. After all, he was not a living being of flesh and blood. He was only responsible for guarding the 3rd level of the trial tower. Zhuowen slowly landed under the bridge. Looking at the young man who had accepted his defeat so calmly, he was surprised. He realized that although the guard was not a living being of flesh and blood, his spiritual intelligence was not much worse than a human warrior. In fact, he was even more intelligent. "Thank you very much." Zhuowen kept the 3 slaughtering arrays and took a step forward, brushing past the young man. Just as he was about to reach the other end of the white jade stone bridge, the young man suddenly opened his mouth. "Successor, I'm very curious. How many slaughtering arrays did you draw on the 2nd level? Was it 3? Zhuowen's footsteps paused, but he did not say anything. Instead, he beckoned with his right hand. Immediately, a destructive force surged out from the void. Soon after, the young man saw the trajectory of a formation that contained destruction being drawn in the void. "Slaughtering array," the young man muttered in a low voice. His feet seemed to be rooted to the ground as he firmly fixed his gaze on Zhuowen's back. This lad had actually drawn 4 slaughtering arrays in succession. This was the first time he had seen such a thing in countless years. Chapter 1285. Chess World. When Zhuowen finally appeared outside the Tower of Trials, the black tortoise's huge body appeared in front of him. Its pair of dark eyes stared at Zhuowen. "Ha ha! Little tortoise, this boy only used 15 days to complete the Tower of Trials. Do you think this boy's talent surpasses your master's?" The illusory voice suddenly rang out, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink slightly. He looked around and was shocked in his heart. He was completely unable to sense where the voice had come from. It was as if it had appeared out of thin air. The black tortoise's eyes darkened and replied indifferently, "I admit that this boy's talent is indeed stronger than my master's. However, whether it is martial arts or mental strength, just having a high talent does not mean that one can become a peerless powerhouse. In addition, one must have a strong will and not die prematurely. Only then will one have great achievement. High talent also means that one has a high starting point. As long as one does not slack off, one's achievements will not be too bad. Let's not argue about this anymore. You can now bring this boy to your master's place of inheritance," the illusory voice said indifferently. The black tortoise nodded and immediately signaled to Zhuowen. The latter naturally understood and stepped onto the black tortoise's back. Then, the man and the ghost disappeared into the group of reef. "Senior Black Tortoise, may I know who the owner of the voice was?" Zhuowen suddenly asked curiously. From the black tortoise's wary attitude, he knew that the owner of the voice was definitely not ordinary. The black tortoise shook his head and said ambiguously, "He is a very stubborn guy. However, I can't reveal his identity. If he wants you to know, he will appear. If he doesn't want you to know and I tell you, that guy might fight me to the death." The black tortoise's attitude naturally surprised Zhuowen. However, since the black tortoise did not intend to say anything, he naturally did not need to ask further. However, he became more curious and interested in the owner of the voice. After a while, the black tortoise carried Zhuowen through the group of reefs and came to an underwater valley. Inside, there was a rather ancient stone statue. The surface of the stone statue was covered in moss, and its facial features were blurry. It was obvious that it had been there for a long time. "You have the complete river diagram formation on you. According to the dragon horse's guidance, you can naturally enter the land of inheritance," the divine tortoise said to Zhuowen in a low, muffled voice after landing below the stone statue. "Thank you, Senior Black Turtle." Zhuowen cupped his hands respectfully and summoned the jade cauldron. At the same time, he relied on the river diagram in the jade cauldron and began to draw the river diagram array stroke by stroke in the void. The boundless yellow river gushed out, and a huge dragon horse carrying the river diagram stepped out of the yellow river. It let out a clear neigh as it stared at the stone statue. Whoosh! In an instant, the dragon horse took a step forward and dashed towards the stone statue's chest. Zhuowen, who had been observing closely, followed closely behind. The moment the dragon horse entered the stone statue's chest, he discovered that there was a human-sized hole in the statue's chest. No wonder the Monster King said that the river diagram formation was the key to opening the inheritance of the Monarch Tomb's master. So that's how it is. Looking at the hole in the stone statue's chest, he instantly understood the meaning of the key. He even realized that the trial tower was unnecessary. He had the river diagram formation on him, so he could directly enter the stone statue to receive the inheritance. There was no need to go through the trouble of entering the trial tower and then coming out to receive the inheritance. However, he also instantly understood that the trial tower was arranged by the divine tortoise without permission. Zhuowen did not reject this arrangement. After all, he had gained a lot of benefits from it, which allowed him to have a deeper understanding of immortal power. "Let's go in and take a look." Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he took a step into the black hole. Soon after, he felt the scene before his eyes change. He discovered that what appeared before him was a stone hall made of stacked jade. The stone hall was supported by large crystal-clear jade pillars. What surprised Zhuowen was that the furnishings in this large stone hall were extremely simple and monotonous. There was only a jade-colored stone table in the stone hall, and beside the table were two jade-colored stone stools. On the stone table there was a chessboard. Apart from that, there was nothing else in the stone hall. Looking at the simple side of the stone hall, Zhuowen frowned. His heart was filled with suspicion. In this stone hall, he did not see anything related to the inheritance. Apart from the table, 2 stools, and a chessboard, there was nothing else. With suspicion in his heart, Zhuowen slowly walked to the stone table and sat on one of the stools. However, his gaze was fixed on the chessboard on the table. On the chessboard, black and white chess pieces were arranged in a mess. Although it looked messy, Zhuowen faintly felt that this somewhat messy arrangement was extremely comfortable and appropriate. It was clearly a mess, but he felt that it was appropriate. This feeling was somewhat strange to Zhuowen. Is there something strange about this chessboard? Muttering softly, Zhuowen focused and quietly stared at the chessboard. Suddenly, he discovered that the chess pieces on the chessboard seemed to have come alive. The chess pieces on the chessboard were moving, and they were actually drawing profound trajectories on the chessboard. Chessboard world, chessboard world. A powerful voice rang out from the chessboard, resounding through the entire stone hall. Afterwards, Zhuowen discovered that the chess pieces on the chessboard moved faster and faster. They were like stars, flickering with black and white light, turning into a white cloud. Through the white clouds, Zhuowen saw a world. Inside, there were mountains, birds chirping, flowers fragrant, waterfalls flowing, and woodcutters moving about. It was like a paradise. At the other end of this paradise, there was a flight of stairs that stretched across the horizon. The flight of stairs was very long, as if it led to the ends of the world. Chessboard world, chessboard world. This chessboard actually contains a miniature world. The master of the tomb must have carved an extremely powerful formation into the chessboard to create it. Zhuowen murmured to himself. He took a step forward and entered the chessboard world. Standing in the air, he overlooked the entire chessboard world. Like a bird, he wandered through the world. He discovered that the humans in the chessboard world were all ordinary people. There were no powerful cultivators. Walking through the chessboard world step by step, Zhuowen saw the vicissitudes of life, the various states of the world: birth, old age, sickness, death, love, hate, and relationship. He could not help but sigh. In the lives of ordinary people, he had seen far too much in the chessboard world. They were unable to transcend life and death, unable to control fate. The only thing they could do was follow the laws of the world. They came when they were born, and they left when they died. At the end of their lives, they were reduced to dust. This is life, but this is not the life I want. Finally, after stepping through everything in the chessboard world, Zhuowen arrived at the end of the world. His gaze became sharp, deep, and determined. He knew very well that everything in the world had a limit. They were restricted by the rules and could not escape the restriction of their lifespan. Even powerful cultivators would reach the end of their lifespan if they were unable to become even more powerful. They would be reduced to dust like ordinary people. However, Zhuowen wasn't willing. He wanted to continue walking. He wanted to walk as high as the heavens and as deep as the earth. He definitely wouldn't be mediocre in his life and turn into a pile of dirt. Instead, he wanted to stand tall in the heavens and earth and live eternally. Become stronger. I need to become stronger. Zhuowen reached out his right hand and grabbed at the sky. Then, his gaze fell on the staircase that led to the sky. His eyes shone brightly. Zhuowen took a step forward and stepped onto the staircase. He walked up step by step with determination in his eyes. He walked into the clouds, into the void, and into the endless darkness. He did not stop. As long as the staircase was as high as it was, he would go as high as it was. He did not stop or hesitate. This is an array diagram? The moment he stepped into the void, Zhuowen discovered that there was a huge stone tablet on the other side of the void. On the stone tablet there was a complicated array diagram. This array diagram was even more profound than the slaughter array diagram. Zhuowen stared at the array diagram on the stone tablet. His hands moved in the void involuntarily. A mysterious aura swept out and a powerful pressure surged out. What a profound array diagram! After copying 1/10 of it, Zhuowen discovered that with his current cultivation level and immortal energy reserves, he was unable to continue copying this nameless array diagram. This is an arcane Saint Master's array diagram. Your cultivation level is too low. It is almost impossible for you to comprehend an array diagram of this level. Even copying it is very difficult, Xiaohe said in a low voice. It really is an arcane Saint Master's array diagram? Can this also be considered a type of inheritance? When the immortal energy in his hands dispersed again, Zhuowen stopped. Instead, he stared at the array diagram on the stone tablet and silently memorized it. He knew that his cultivation level was too low right now. When his cultivation level reached a higher level in the future, perhaps he would be able to completely comprehend it. Zhuowen sat before the stone tablet for 3 days. He silently observed the slivers of heavenly law contained within the array diagram. This was an indelible benefit to his formation Tao and mental energy. 3 days later, Zhuowen continued to advance on the staircase. In just a short while, he actually encountered another identical stone tablet beside the staircase. However, the array diagram on the stone tablet was completely different. Zhuowen continued to stay before the second stone tablet for 3 days. Although he was unable to comprehend the profundity of the formation diagram within the stone tablet, at the very least, it provided indelible training and benefits to his array Tao and immortal force. As expected of an arcane Saint Master, his attainments in the formation Tao are who knows how many times greater than mine. A sliver of admiration appeared in Zhuowen's eyes as he slowly stood up. An arcane Saint Master was an existence comparable to a legendary saint. Just the immortal energy they grasped was already terrifying enough, not to mention the various strange and unpredictable methods of the formation Tao. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that as he continued to comprehend these profound diagrams, the immortal force in his body continued to grow. At the same time, his spiritual force and origin energy also showed signs of rapidly increasing as his immortal force grew. Chapter 1286. Heavenless soared the void staircase was extremely long. Zhuowen walked up the staircase step by step. He found that there were 16 steels on the staircase, and each steel was engraved with different formations. Every single formation diagram contained profound truth. Although Zhuowen's current level of cultivation was too low to comprehend the formations, he was able to constantly temper his immortal force by copying the formations. Then, he would use the immortal force to feed back his mental strength and origin force, causing the two powers in his body to constantly increase. In front of the 16th steel, Zhuowen suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, his temperament had changed. He became free and easy, as if he had shed all his splendor. The aura on his body was much stronger than before. You've gained a lot. By comprehending the formations in these steels, your spiritual power has advanced again, reaching level 6 complete. Xiaohe's slightly surprised voice rang in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen smiled and said, "It's not just my spiritual power. The celestial power fed back from comprehending the formations is extremely rich. My original power has just reached the peak of level 1 Emperor Realm. I'm afraid it won't be long before I can advance to level 2 Emperor Realm." Speaking of this, Zhuowen's eyes were filled with excitement. After a warrior advanced to the Emperor Realm, it was naturally more difficult to break through than before. Of course, advancing to the Emperor Realm was slightly easier than advancing to the Emperor Realm from the peak of Celestial Master Realm. After all, advancing from the Celestial Master to the Emperor Realm was a big leap. Once a warrior crossed the threshold, there would be an unprecedented transformation. Because of Xiaohe, Zhuowen needed to be well prepared to advance. He had to accumulate enough to have a slight chance of breaking through to the Emperor Realm. This could be seen from the fact that he had used 12 Hearts of Emperor. After crossing the threshold of the Emperor Realm, the next advancement was naturally relatively simple. Of course, this was compared to advancing to the Emperor realm. If compared to the small realms of the Four Reverends realm, advancing to the small realms of the Emperor realm was naturally more difficult. After all, Zhuowen had just advanced to the Emperor realm. It was extremely fast for his original power to reach the peak of level 1 Emperor realm in such a short period of time. We're reaching the end. When Zhuowen walked past the 16th stone tablet, he discovered the end of the void staircase. At the other end of the staircase, there was a huge pavilion made of beautiful jade floating in the air. The void pavilion was made of beautiful jade. It was richly carved and magnificent. As Zhuowen stepped into the pavilion, a trace of tranquility appeared in his heart. He felt relaxed and happy. There was a faint fragrance lingering in the pavilion. When the fragrance entered his nose, it refreshed his mind. Zhuowen felt as if his mind had become much clearer under the effect of this fragrance. The pavilion was very quiet, and the furnishings inside were also very monotonous. A shabby praying mat floated in the middle, and behind the praying mat was a stone platform. There were only two things on the stone platform: a long sword covered in cracks, and a plain wooden tablet. At first glance, these two things seemed very unremarkable. However, when Zhuowen took a closer look, he discovered that these two things were extraordinary. Although the long sword covered in cracks looked shabby, it revealed a trace of pressure that made Zhuowen's heart skip a beat. Zhuowen had seen quite a few high-class emperor weapons in the past. However, he was stunned to discover that the pressure from this tattered longsword was actually above that of a high-class emperor weapon. "This is a saint weapon," Xiao Hei's voice suddenly rang out, causing Zhuowen's entire body to tremble. He stared at the shabby long sword in front of him, his throat trembling and his mouth dry. Zhuowen had indeed seen a saint weapon before. It was the Azure Dragon Hall. However, other than the Azure Dragon Hall, he had not seen any other saint weapons. Now that Xiao Hei said that the shabby long sword in front of him was a saint weapon, Zhuowen could not remain calm. "That's not right. The pressure of this long sword is much weaker than the one in the Azure Dragon Hall. Is this really a saint weapon?" Zhuowen asked with some doubt. Since emperor weapons are divided into different grades, saint weapons are naturally divided into different grades. Emperor weapons are divided into low grade, mid grade, and high grade. Saint weapons are also divided into 3 grades: profound saint weapon, heavenly saint weapon, and immortal saint weapon, Xiao Hei explained indifferently. "I see. Since saint weapons are divided into 3 grades, does that mean that saints are also divided into different grades?" Zhuowen asked curiously again. Saints were legendary existences in the Eastern land. It was said that such figures could move mountains and fill seas with a wave of their hand. They could even open up their own small worlds and use their own saint force to forge a powerful world. The strength of their various divine abilities could be said to be deeply rooted in people's hearts. Because Zhuowen had never come into contact with the saint realm, he naturally did not know much about the division of saint. However, he knew that Xiao Hei definitely knew. After all, this guy's origin was extraordinary. It was very likely that he came from the mysterious Central Land. Asking Xiao Hei was naturally not a problem. It is indeed as you have guessed. Saints are also divided into different grades. Above the Emperor realm is the Pilgrimage realm. In layman's terms, we call Pilgrimage realm cultivators saint. There are 3 major realms in the Pilgrimage realm, which are Profound Saint, Heavenly Saint, and Immortal Saint. Furthermore, the reason why saints possess various abilities that martial emperors do not possess is because saints have grasped the law of the divine inscriptions. The so-called law of the divine inscriptions is a law that saints comprehend through the law of the heavens and earth and their supreme saint power. Although the power of the Saint Mark law is much weaker than the laws of heaven and earth, it is, after all, comprehended from the laws of heaven and earth. It also contains a trace of the laws of heaven and earth, which is the so-called heaven's might. It is precisely because of the power of the laws that the strength of saints completely surpasses all Emperor realm cultivators. Xiao He paused at this point, giving Zhuowen time to digest what he had said. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a look of understanding. He silently digested all the knowledge about the saint realm that Xiao He had told him. He did not know about it before, but with the existence of Xiao He understood the specific realm of saints one step ahead of others. Then this long sword in front of us should be the lowest level of Saint Tool, which is also a profound Saint Tool. Zhuowen's gaze fell on the broken long sword and muttered in a low voice. You are right. This long sword should have been refined by the master of the Emperor's tomb. Although the master of the Emperor's tomb was only a semi-saint, he also had the identity of an arcane saint master. Even if his martial arts realm had not reached the pilgrimage realm, it should not be difficult for him to refine a profound sage-level Saint Tool by relying on the power and knowledge of the arcane arts, Xiao He indifferently replied. Zhuowen nodded and said with a slightly hesitant voice, Then the Azure Dragon Palace is of a higher level than this long sword. It should be a heavenly Saint Tool? You underestimate the Azure Dragon Palace too much. The Azure Dragon Taoist was an influential figure 10,000 years ago. He was a saint, immortal saint. The Fighting Buddha Demon Saint and the Wind Thunder Divine Monarch were also at this level. They were extremely famous geniuses back then, so the Azure Dragon Palace is an immortal Saint Tool. Xiao He shook his head and said, It is actually so powerful? Zhuowen's eyes revealed a shocked expression. Speaking of which, his luck was really good. Whether it was the Wind Thunder Divine Monarch, the Fighting Buddha Demon Saint, or the Azure Dragon Taoist, they were all saints of the immortal saint realm. They were definitely the peak existences among saints, and he had actually encountered them before. Although he had never seen them in person, he had obtained the things of these three saints. The Wind Thunder Divine Monarch's Thunder 3 Wings, the Fighting Buddha Demon Saint's Buddha Demon Eye, and the Azure Dragon Taoist's entire inheritance. This profound Saint Tool is completely broken. How much power can it still retain? After the excitement, Zhuowen discovered a serious problem. That was, the long sword in front of him was a little damaged. Could it still be used? From the damage of the Saint Tool, it was not difficult for Zhuowen to imagine how fierce the battle between the owner of the Emperor's tomb and the heavenly insect avatar was. Even the Saint Tool was broken. That battle was really a little terrifying. Looking at the situation of this Saint Tool, I'm afraid it is only a little bit away from being damaged. If I'm not wrong, this long sword of the Saint Tool level can only be used twice at most. After 2 times, I'm afraid it will directly disintegrate. Xiao He said with a little pity. Zhuowen's eyes revealed a touch of disappointment, but immediately returned to normal. With a wave of his right hand, he grasped the long sword in his hand and said softly, After all, it is a Saint Tool. If it can be used twice, it will be of great help to me. Holding the long sword, Zhuowen discovered that there were 3 small seal characters carved on the hilt of the sword. He murmured in a low voice, Heavenless Sword. It's named Heavenless Sword. Does it mean that it is lawless? Thinking of this, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a strange look, but it was only fleeting. After storing the Heavenless Sword into his spirit ring, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the ordinary wooden tablet on the stone platform. There was a rather profound pattern drawn on the wooden tablet. When Zhuowen stared at the pattern, he frowned slightly. He actually felt as if he had fallen into endless darkness, and his head actually became dizzy. What are the patterns drawn on the wooden tablet? Zhuowen took a few steps back and turned his head away. His heart faintly trembled. The patterns on the wooden tablet were too strange, as if they wanted to devour his consciousness. Damn, it's actually the Saint Rune Law. Suddenly, Xiao He's slightly fluctuating voice rang out, causing Zhuowen's pupils to shrink. He also did not expect that the patterns drawn on the wooden tablet would actually be the Saint Rune Law. When Zhuowen calmed down, he also understood. Although the owner of the emperor's tomb was only a half-saint, he should have first comprehended the Saint Rune law and become an invincible emperor lord before stepping into the half-saint realm. This also explained why the Saint Rune law was left behind in the tomb of the owner of the emperor's tomb. Since it's a Saint Rune law, why is it that my consciousness is unable to detect it at all? In fact, my consciousness was nearly devoured by it. Zhuowen frowned slightly as he spoke in astonishment. Chapter 1287. By Feng, you can give this Saint Rune law to your father, Zhuo Xiaotian, for reference. It should be able to speed up his advancement to the invincible sovereign lord realm, Xiao He said indifferently. Zhuowen nodded and no longer looked at the runes on the wooden tablet. Instead, he kept it in his spirit ring. Just as Xiao He had said, his current cultivation was too low. It was impossible for him to comprehend the Saint Rune law. Giving it to his father was the most appropriate choice. Moreover, Zhuowen had a feeling that if he could pass the third level of the Azure Dragon Hall, he might be able to obtain the complete inheritance of the Azure Dragon Taoist, as well as the Saint Rune law. After all, the Azure Dragon Taoist was a celestial saint existence. His Saint Rune law was definitely very powerful. The moment he put away the wooden tablet, a powerful aura suddenly filled the entire pavilion. Then, Zhuowen was stunned to find that the shabby praying mat floating in the middle of the pavilion was bursting with blazing light. The light then slowly condensed into a hunched figure. It was an old man with a hunched back and a face full of wrinkles. However, his eyes were extremely sharp and emitted a terrifying light. The old man stared at Zhuowen without saying a word. Instead, he stretched out his skinny right hand. Zhuowen was shocked to find that the jade cauldron in his sea of consciousness involuntarily flew out. The river diagram contained within the jade cauldron, and a huge dragon horse stepped out. With a neigh, it appeared in the void while stepping on the yellow river. The complete river diagram, and this jade cauldron? The light in the old man's eyes became even more intense. Then, his gaze moved down and landed on Zhuowen. He smiled and said, "This old man remembers that the river diagram was incomplete. Did you complete the complete river diagram?" Zhuowen was secretly shocked. This old man was so powerful that he could silently summon the river diagram and jade cauldron from his sea of consciousness. It was as if the old man was extremely familiar with the river diagram. After pondering for a moment, Zhuowen nodded and said, "I did complete the river diagram." "Senior, are you the master of the Emperor's tomb?" "Master of the Emperor's tomb? Interesting, you can call me that too." This entire tomb was indeed built by this old man. "Of course, my name is Bai Feng. You can call me Elder Bai." The old man smiled faintly and revealed his identity. "Elder Bai, the outside world is saying that you have fallen. Perhaps there is a problem with the rumors. You are not dead?" Zhuowen asked tentatively. Elder Bai chuckled and said plainly, "You don't have to test me. I can tell you clearly that this is only a strand of my spirit. I'm already dead. This strand of spirit is only there to guide my successor. Can you tell me what happened in the Monarch region and the Monarch tomb? Is it related to the heavenly insect avatar?" Zhuowen nodded his head when he heard old Bai speak in such a manner. Immediately, he began to inquire about the matter back then. "Oh? You actually know about the heavenly insect?" Elder Bai was startled. Soon after, his deep gaze focused on Zhuowen from afar. His eyes revealed a contemplative expression. Clearly, he was extremely surprised that Zhuowen actually knew about the heavenly insect. After all, this thing was not inferior to the eastern lands. It was unlikely that an ordinary person would know about it. "Old fellow," Zhuowen knew about the heavenly insect because this dragon lord told him. "There's no need to make a fuss." Suddenly, a black light shot out from between Zhuowen's brows and revealed the appearance of Xiao He. "You are the great Nether Saint Dragon?" Elder Bai's gaze landed on Xiao He. He was initially startled, but soon after, he seemed to have thought of something. His gaze immediately became extremely interesting. However, his gaze quickly landed on the jade cauldron and muttered to himself in a low voice, "That's right, this child possesses this jade cauldron. No wonder you would follow by his side. Elder Bai, you recognize this jade cauldron?" Hearing Elder Bai's muttering, Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and suddenly opened his mouth to ask. Elder Bai nodded his head and said, "I have indeed heard of this jade cauldron. Back then, I even came out to search for this cauldron after reading some of the stories. However, I was unable to find it. This is because, according to the legends, this cauldron was damaged in a great battle 10,000 years ago, after which it fled into the distant void and disappeared without a trace." "Then what kind of cauldron is this?" Zhuowen suddenly became nervous and asked in a deep voice. It could be said that the reason why Zhuowen came to the Sky Armor continent was inseparably related to this jade cauldron in his mind. Therefore, he was very curious about the origin of this cauldron. "I am not very clear about the exact origin of this cauldron. I only know that this cauldron is called the Fushi cauldron. There is also an ancient saying regarding this cauldron. Since you have perfected the river diagram, you should also know this ancient saying, right?" Elder Bai smiled faintly and said, "The river diagram, the Luo book, and the saints follow," Zhuowen said in a deep voice. "The river diagram and the book of Luo are two powerful formations. Back then, after I found the river diagram and the book of Luo by accident, I found out about the existence of the Fushi cauldron. Moreover, these two formations are a part of the Fushi cauldron. Therefore, I thought of searching for the Fushi cauldron. Unfortunately, I was unable to find it. Now that I have seen the Fushi cauldron after my death, I don't know if I am lucky or unlucky." Elder Bai smiled bitterly. Zhuowen revealed a look of understanding. The damaged river diagram was found by Mu Feng in this emperor's tomb. This place of inheritance of Elder Bai was protected by the book of Luo's formation. It turned out that all of these were inseparable from his jade cauldron. Then, what is the relationship between this Fushi cauldron and Xiao He? Zhuowen suddenly asked. "Haha, the great Nether Saint Dragon was extremely famous 10,000 years ago. It was said that he was the best friend of the owner of the Fushi cauldron." Elder Bai shook his head. However, his gaze landed on Xiao He as he laughed. Xiao He was silent for a moment. Then, she said indifferently, "It seems like you know quite a lot." As she spoke, Xiao He looked at Zhuowen and said, "Kid, back then, this Dragon Lord said that I chose you because of this jade cauldron. Since it chose you, there must be a reason for it. That's why this Dragon Lord chose to follow you in the end. I know. If it wasn't for you, I probably wouldn't have been able to reach this step. However, what I'm curious about is, who exactly is the owner of the Fushi cauldron?" Zhuowen's gaze landed on Xiao He. He knew that Xiao He definitely knew the identity of the owner of the Fushi cauldron. "His name is Fushi. During that great battle 10,000 years ago, he went missing. Even I don't know where that guy went." Xiao He shook her head. She was slightly sad as she said this. Seeing Xiao He like this, he knew that Xiao He and that Fushi were probably very close. "Perhaps we might find some clues about Fushi after entering the Central Plains." Zhuowen chuckled. Xiao He nodded. Her eyes were filled with gratitude. She knew that Zhuowen had decided to help her find Fushi. "Old man, you've said so much nonsense. Why don't you tell me about the Imperial region? Also, it's not that easy to become an arcane Saint Master. You actually managed to become an arcane Saint Master in the Sea of Bitterness. Even I find it a bit inconceivable." "Old man, you should have quite a few secrets on you, right?" Blackie said rather impolitely. Elder Bai was slightly helpless. He said indifferently, "I'm not from the Sea of Misery. I'm from the Central Plains." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect that the owner of the tomb wasn't from the Sea of Misery, but from the Central Plains of the core region of the Heavenly Armor continent. That's right. Becoming an arcane Saint Master is even harder than becoming a saint. In the entire 9 Netherworld realm, There are probably less than a handful of people who can become arcane Saint Masters. It's indeed very unusual for an arcane Saint Master to appear in the Sea of Misery. Xiao Hei nodded. She wasn't too surprised. This elder Bai was able to recognize her identity as the great Nether Saint Dragon and even recognized the Fushi Cauldron. It was clear that this person was extraordinary. There might not be someone like her in the entire Eastern Plains. This also meant that Xiao Hei's expression didn't change much after hearing Elder Bai say that he was from the Central Plains. In the Central Plains, only the Chaos Temple and the 4 great battlefields can nurture arcane Saint Masters. Which of these 5 forces do you come from? Xiao Hei suddenly asked. The Chaos Temple. Elder Bai said indifferently. So it's the Chaos Temple. Then you're probably the one who brought the sky insect avatar out of the Central Plains? Xiao Hei suddenly asked in a deep voice. Zhuowen became vigilant when he heard this. If what Xiao Hei said was true, then this elder Bai should be the main culprit who brought the sky insect avatar to the Sea of Misery. Elder Bai smiled bitterly and said, You're right. I was indeed the one who brought the sky insect avatar. However, it wasn't intentional. Perhaps because he sensed the vigilance on Zhuowen and Xiao Hei's faces, Elder Bai shrugged and said, I'll tell you about what happened back then. Perhaps you'll understand my difficulties after hearing it. The main body of the sky insect was suppressed by the Chaos Temple and the 4 great battlefields in the Central Plains. I, Bai Feng, am an arcane Saint Master from the Chaos Temple. At the same time, I'm one of the people in charge of guarding the sky insect seal. Elder Bai began to slowly narrate everything that happened back then. Just as he said, he was one of the people in charge of guarding the sky insect seal in the Chaos Temple. His main responsibility was to reinforce the sky insect seal. After all, the sky insect was just too powerful. If he didn't reinforce the seal regularly, it might find a loophole. At that time, the consequences would be unimaginable. This kind of reinforcement of the seal required 5 arcane Saint Masters each time. During the last reinforcement of the seal, the cunning sky insect actually released a weak avatar that possessed Elder Bai's robes. Old Bai was completely unaware of this matter. After strengthening the seal for around 3 months, Old Bai finally discovered the sky worm avatar that was attached to his body. However, the thing that caused Old Bai to be furious was that the sky worm had used some unknown method to merge with his physical body and merged into his flesh. It was already too late to expel it. At that moment, Elder Bai realized the severity of the problem. He knew that if he continued to allow the sky insect avatar to remain hidden in his body, there would be a day when he would be replaced by the sky insect avatar. At that time, it would really be terrible. However, at the same time, he didn't dare to tell this to the upper echelons of the Chaos Temple because the Chaos Temple was extremely cruel when it came to dealing with sky insects. If the upper echelons learned that he had been possessed by a sky insect, he would definitely die. Chapter 1288. Elder Bai realized that he might be killed if the upper echelons of the Primal Chaos Temple found out about his situation, so he made up his mind to leave the Primal Chaos Temple. Later on, Elder Bai found an excuse to leave the Primal Chaos Temple. In order to prevent the Primal Chaos Temple from finding him, he left the Middle Earth and came to the remote Eastern Earth. He established the Monarch Domain in the Eastern Earth's Sea of Bitterness. You established the Imperial Domain? And the Emperor's Tomb was also created by you. Did you do all of this because of the celestial insect avatar in your body? Xiao Hei suddenly asked. Elder Bai nodded and said in a deep voice, the celestial insect avatar had already fused with my body. If I wasn't an arcane Saint Master, my sea of consciousness might have been eaten away by the celestial insect. At that time, I would have become its puppet. To stop the celestial insect, I established the entire Imperial Domain and even built the Emperor's Tomb in the Imperial Domain. My goal was to stop the celestial insect from stealing my consciousness. Elder Bai nodded. After I left my inheritance in the Emperor's tomb, I used a secret technique to separate my sea of consciousness from my body. Although I succeeded, the celestial insect avatar was extremely cunning. It actually escaped after I separated my sea of consciousness from my body. Fortunately, I nurtured many emperors. The moment the celestial insect avatar escaped, they all attacked it. Speaking up to there, the bitterness at the corner of Elder Bai's mouth became even more intense. Xiao He said coldly, "Looks like you really don't understand the celestial insect at all. It's most proficient in devouring and plundering. You nurtured so many emperors. It's like sending lambs to the tiger's den." Elder Bai sighed softly, "You're right. Although I'm an arcane saint master of the primal chaos temple, I've never seen the celestial insect's abilities. The emperors of the imperial domain didn't manage to destroy the celestial insect. Instead, they were all devoured by the celestial insect avatar when they least expected it. The celestial insect avatar became extremely powerful, almost comparable to a half-saint. If I was at my peak, it wouldn't have been difficult to seal the celestial insect. Unfortunately, because of the celestial insect, I abandoned my body and only my sea of consciousness remained. As a result, I fought the celestial insect. In the end, I was no match for the heavenly insect. The spiritual body that carried the sea of consciousness was severely injured by the heavenly insect." Xiao He frowned slightly and asked in surprise, "Since you were no match for the heavenly insect, how did you seal the heavenly insect?" Sigh. "I've already set up a sealing formation in the tomb. However, to activate the sealing formation, I need to sacrifice myself. Unless it's absolutely necessary, I won't use the sealing formation. However, after I discovered the terror of the heavenly insects, I finally decided to activate the sealing formation." Speaking to this point, the bitterness at the corner of Elder Bai's mouth became even more intense. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and sighed. He had not expected the destruction of the Emperor's domain and the Emperor's tomb to be related to the heavenly insect. He had not expected the heavenly insect's clone to be brought over from the primal chaos divine temple by the owner of the Emperor's tomb, Bai Feng. "Old man, you're really harming yourself and others. Do you know that if the heavenly insect avatar appeared in the Eastern Earth, it would be a disaster for the entire place? Moreover, due to the heavenly insect's terrifying ability to endlessly devour, it will definitely become more and more powerful. Once it has the ability to release the main body of the primal chaos divine temple, the entire heavenly armor continent will truly be in danger." Xiao He's gaze became extremely stern. His voice became extremely cold as well. However, Elder Bai's face was filled with bitterness. He knew that his actions back then were inappropriate. If he had known that this would be the outcome, he would have reported this matter to the upper echelons of the primal chaos divine temple. Perhaps there would not have been so much trouble then. Forget it. You only did this because your life was in danger. It's not your fault. Xiao He waved his hand. Suddenly, he said sternly, "Old man, the heavenly insect avatar has opened a portion of the seal." Someone opened the seal? Who is so daring? Doesn't he know how terrifying and dangerous the heavenly insect is? Elder Bai's expression changed slightly. Zhuowen briefly explained the situation in the Emperor's tomb. However, Elder Bai frowned slightly. He said coldly, "That Mu Feng is really shameless. He actually colluded with the heavenly insect for this old man's inheritance. Even if that guy enters the inheritance land, this old man will not give the inheritance to him. You created such a huge emperor's tomb. You must have a backup plan, right?" Xiao He suddenly asked. Elder Bai's gaze flickered. He glanced at Zhuowen and said, "I do have a backup plan. However, this young man's talent is indeed not bad. However, his spiritual energy cultivation is too low. It's only at the 6th grade complete realm. I'm afraid that he won't be able to withstand my sea of consciousness." Old man, you still have your sea of consciousness? Xiao Hei's eyes suddenly lit up. Elder Bai nodded and said, the sea of consciousness contains this old man's lifetime of cultivation, experience, and inheritance. Moreover, this old man is an arcane saint master. If he wants to inherit this old man's sea of consciousness, he must at least be an arcane heavenly master. You don't have to worry about that. Zhuowen has cultivated the myriad evolution scripture. His spiritual energy is much stronger than ordinary arcane masters of the same level. Although he's only at the 6th grade complete realm right now, in terms of spiritual energy, there's still a gap between him and an arcane heavenly master, but it's probably not too far off. Xiao Hei smiled. Elder Bai looked at Zhuowen with a bit of surprise and asked, you've actually cultivated the myriad evolution scripture. Looks like you're quite lucky. If that's the case, I can pass my sea of consciousness to you. However, the process of passing it on might be a bit painful. If you can't take it, then say it beforehand. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. Hearing that, Zhuowen's eyes shone with excitement. Elder Bai was an arcane saint master. If he could accept the sea of consciousness of such an existence, it would bring him endless benefits. This was because the most precious part of an arcane master was their sea of consciousness. Not only did the sea of consciousness contain powerful spiritual energy, but it also contained the cultivation experiences and records of many arcane masters. If he could obtain the sea of consciousness of an arcane saint master, it would be like having an arcane saint master by his side to guide him. There would probably be very little hindrance to breaking through to arcane saint master in the future. Elder Bai pointed with his right hand and immediately, the tattered praying mat beneath him began to emit an extremely blazing light. Afterwards, Zhuowen discovered that a golden sphere had risen from the praying mat. Within the sphere was a golden ocean. This was the sea of consciousness of an arcane master. Zhuowen could even feel an extremely terrifying pressure from the sphere. Before this pressure, Zhuowen felt like he was facing an insurmountable mountain. This was the sea of consciousness of an arcane saint master. Zhuowen, calm your mind and accept this sea of consciousness. Don't let your mind wander, or you'll fail at the last step, Xiao Hei suddenly warned sternly. Zhuowen hurriedly calmed his mind and relaxed his mind. He silently stared at the slowly approaching sphere. The pressure that belonged to an arcane saint master was right in front of him. Zhuowen's entire body trembled and his heart trembled. However, he still straightened his back and calmly stared at the sphere. The sea of consciousness in front of him was about to belong to him. Why should he be afraid? What he needed to do right now was to completely absorb this sea of consciousness into his own sea of consciousness. Boom! Finally, the golden sphere began to slowly sink into Zhuowen's forehead. Afterwards, Zhuowen only felt a thunderous sound in his head. It was as if thousands of lightning bolts were surging in his head at this moment. It was extremely terrifying and intense. Zhuowen's sea of consciousness was dark gray, as if it was enveloped by dark clouds. It was completely different from Elder Bai's shining golden sea of consciousness. This was the difference between a 6th grade Arcana Master and an Arcane Saint Master. When an Arcana Master stepped into the 7th grade, or in other words, Heavenly Arcana Master, their sea of consciousness would undergo a transformation. This was the first transformation, and after becoming an Arcane Saint Master, the sea of consciousness would undergo a second transformation. This was why Zhuowen's sea of consciousness was gray and hazy, while Elder Bai's sea of consciousness was still golden despite the erosion of time. At this moment, in the sky above the gray sea of consciousness, a golden ball was falling down like the setting sun. The blazing golden light illuminated the gray sea of consciousness, making it extremely dazzling. As the golden ball continued to descend, Zhuowen's face turned gloomy as he discovered that his sea of consciousness was surging with monstrous waves. His sea of consciousness, which was originally calm and tranquil, was now surging and boiling like a restless heart. The entire sea of consciousness began to hum and vibrate. Under the influence of this vibration, Zhuowen actually directly spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were a little dim. Little guy, the process of inheriting the sea of consciousness is originally very painful. You just need to endure it, or else it will really be for naught. Elder Bai's ancient voice rang out, causing Zhuowen to seriously nod his head. Soon after, he controlled the enormous mental energy in his body, turning it into many tough threads that covered the surface of his sea of consciousness, suppressing the restlessness of his sea of consciousness. Rumble! The golden sphere finally reached the surface of the gray sea of consciousness. Immediately, the entire sea of consciousness was stirred up by a tsunami. Zhuowen once again spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was incomparably pale. However, his eyes were filled with stubbornness. He firmly controlled his mental energy and suppressed his sea of consciousness. The instant the golden sphere entered the gray sea of consciousness, countless golden lights erupted. Soon after, the golden sphere shattered. Within it, the turbulent golden sea was like 100 rivers flowing into the sea as it converged into the gray sea of consciousness. Pain! The instant the golden sea poured into the gray sea of consciousness, Zhuowen held his head with both of his hands and involuntarily cried out in pain. However, he still forcefully endured this pain and controlled the gray sea of consciousness to accept the golden sea that was pouring in. The golden sea grew more and more. When the golden light merged with the gray sea of consciousness, a strange dark golden color actually began to emerge. Waves of surging mental energy began to rush out from the sea of consciousness. As if it was feeding back, it rose into the sky above the sea of consciousness and entered Zhuowen's Naiwen Palace. Chapter 1289. Fushi Cauldron. At that moment, Zhuowen's mental energy overflowed in all directions. His clothes and hair fluttered in the wind. He slowly opened his eyes, which contained a sharp golden light. At that moment, the mental energy in his body was much more powerful than before. Boom! With a wave of his hand, Zhuowen's spiritual energy surged out, turning into countless spiritual tentacles that spread out in all directions. The entire space seemed to shatter and collapse. It was extremely terrifying. So powerful! Zhuowen stared at his right hand, his heart trembling. At this moment, the spiritual energy in his body was much stronger than before. It was as if the spiritual energy in his entire sea of consciousness had undergone a metamorphosis. I've advanced from the 6th rank to the Heavenly Arcana Master, Zhuowen murmured in a low voice. His heart was filled with joy. He didn't expect that after accepting Bai Feng's sea of consciousness, his spiritual energy would advance to the Heavenly Arcana Master level in one fell swoop. Moreover, he discovered that the sea of consciousness contained countless cultivation experiences, allowing him to gain enlightenment on the path of the spiritual energy. He knew that the path from Heavenly Arcana Master to Saint Master was undoubtedly much smoother than the average Arcana Master. This was because he had obtained the sea of consciousness of a Saint Master. What he lacked now was the accumulation of spiritual energy. When his spiritual energy reached a certain level and combined with powerful immortal force, he would become an Arcana Saint Master. Both Heavenly Arcana Master and Saint Master have 3 minor realms? Zhuowen frowned slightly as he muttered to himself. He had received a lot of information from Elder Bai Feng's Sea of Consciousness, including the specific realms of Heavenly Arcana Master and Saint Master. Arcana Masters from the 1st to the 6th rank also had 3 minor realms, which were Minor Success, Greater Success, and Great Perfection. However, after advancing to the Heavenly Arcana Master level, there were also 3 minor realms, but they were called Minor Heavenly Realm, Middle Heavenly Realm, and Great Heavenly Realm. These 3 minor realms corresponded to the low-level, mid-level, and high-level Great Heavenly Realm. The ranks of Arcana Saint Masters were similar to those of the Pilgrim Realm. They were Profound Saint Master, Heaven Saint Master, and Immortal Saint Master. Among them, Bai Feng was a profound saint master. According to Zhuowen's estimation, Mu Feng, who had displayed great strength in the past, should have reached the heaven realm, and was extremely close to the great heavenly realm. After all, the strength Mu Feng was very close to the seventh-level great heavenly realm. But the heavenly and immortal saint master. However, the heavenly and immortal saint masters will require your own effort, and heavenly and saint. At that moment, Elder Bai, who was transformed from a strand of divine telekinesis, became slightly dimmer. It was clear that the inheritance in his sea of consciousness had consumed a lot of his energy. Elder Bai, is there a realm above Saint Master Celestial? Zhuowen bowed respectfully, but a sliver of ambition appeared in his eyes. Was. Mu was, but was fine, but was Bibian little guy, you're very ambitious. That's a good question. With that, Bai Feng's eyes became blurred. He said faintly, above Arcana Saint Master, there's a realm called Divine Arcana Master. This kind of existence only exists in legend. Even in the Chaotic Temple, there's no such person. There really is an even more powerful Arcana Master above the Arcana Saint Master. Zhuowen's expression changed as he muttered to himself. Xiao He sneered. Divine Arcana Master is already comparable to Soul Transformation Realm experts. It can even be said that the influence of Divine Arcana Masters is even more terrifying than Soul Transformation Realm cultivators. Since the creation of the Heavenly Armor Continent, although there have been world-shaking godhood experts, there has never been a Divine Arcana Master. Elder Bai bitterly smiled. The Abyss Saint Dragon is right. There has never been a Divine Arcana Master on the Heavenly Armor Continent. Even in our Chaotic Temple, the strongest is only Immortal Saint Master. If I'm above Heavenly Saint Master, the upper echelon of the Chaotic Temple won't kill me even if I'm possessed. Instead, they'll spend a lot of resources to get rid of the insect for me. Unfortunately, I'm only a profound Saint Master. Although there aren't many profound Saint Masters in the Chaotic Temple, there are still quite a few of them. The upper echelon of the Chaotic Temple won't spend a lot of resources to get rid of the insect because the cost of getting rid of it is enough to nurture another profound Saint Master. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed when he heard this. Profound Saint Masters were arcane Saint Masters after all. They were world-shaking existences in the Eastern lands, but the primal Chaos Temple that the Bai Feng spoke of didn't seem to be particularly important. Just what kind of existence was the primal Chaos Temple? Old man, this strand of your soul shouldn't be able to last much longer, right? If you have any other wishes, you can tell this kid and he'll help you fulfill them. After all, this kid has received your legacy, so he'll have to do something for you. Xiao He pointed at Zhuowen and snickered. His sneaky smile almost made Zhuowen lose control of his right hand and slap him. Of course, this was only a thought. Zhuowen also looked at Bai Feng. Senior, if you have any wishes, feel free to tell me. Bai Feng was gratified. I'm glad that you're so considerate. If I really have any wishes, I'm most worried about my clan. With that, Bai Feng waved his sleeve and a strand of information flowed into Zhuowen's mind. He continued. The Central Lands are divided into 99 prefectures, and each prefecture is a small world. My Bai clan is located in the Green Lotus Prefecture and is quite a powerful clan. However, the main reason why the Bai clan is prosperous is because I joined the Chaotic Temple and received its protection. However, I've been missing for nearly 1,000 years. I'm afraid that the Bai clan has lost the protection of the Chaotic Temple. I wonder how my Bai clan is doing? If you have the heart, you can visit the Bai clan when you enter the Central Lands. If there are any talented juniors in the Bai clan, you can pass on my inheritance and knowledge to them. Zhuowen nodded and said seriously, if I really go to the Central Lands, I'll definitely go to the Green Lotus Prefectures Bai clan. Senior can rest assured. Seeing that Zhuowen agreed so seriously, Bai Fong was satisfied and said, "You have the aura of the 4-kill formation on you. The black turtle in the pool brought you to the training tower, right?" Zhuowen nodded. Bai Fong's eyes flickered and he continued, "Then you should have learned the immortal energy method. What do you think of immortal energy?" Zhuowen pondered for a moment before saying solemnly, "Celestial force is the product of the combination of mental energy and origin energy. It's a powerful energy that surpasses both mental energy and origin energy. Moreover, celestial force can be used on formations, instantly setting up formations and unleashing powerful formations. It can even erupt like origin energy, allowing it to unleash powerful attacks and defenses. Then you should know that immortal energy is also divided into different levels," Bai Fong said with a smile. Immortal energy is also divided into different levels? I'd like to hear more about it." Zhuowen was startled and asked humbly. Bai Fong nodded and pondered for a moment. "As far as I know, immortal energy is divided into 6 levels. They are low grade, medium grade, high grade, peerless grade, holy grade, and creation grade. I think the great Nether Saint Dragon knows the reason why immortal energy is divided into different levels." At this point, the Bai Fong suddenly looked at Blackie and said ambiguously, "You're right. This old man is right. There is indeed such a division of immortal power. The specific reason is that immortal power can not only be used to draw the formation, but also to refine immortal pills. Different levels of immortal power can refine immortal pills of different levels. Low-grade immortal pills, middle-grade immortal pills, high-grade immortal pills, and even the top-grade immortal pills of creation," Blackie said lightly. "Immortal pills?" Zhuowen was startled. He had heard of immortal pills before, but this was the first time he had heard of immortal pills. However, he knew that they were called immortal pills because they were refined with immortal energy. There are many recipes for immortal pills in the Fushi Cauldron. You couldn't refine them back then because you didn't have immortal energy, so I didn't tell you about it," Xiaohei said calmly. "I see." Zhuowen nodded. Then his eyes burned with passion. "Now that I'm cultivating immortal energy, doesn't that mean I'm qualified to refine immortal pills?" "You can say that. Fushi is a genius at refining immortal pills. Back then, he inscribed many recipes in the Fushi Cauldron. At the same time, he also inscribed the He-Tu and Luo-Shu formations. The owner of the Fushi Cauldron doesn't need to know the technique of refining immortal pills. He only needs to collect the materials and you can refine the corresponding immortal pills," Xiaohei said with a smile. Zhuowen nodded. The Jade Cauldron did have this ability back then. However, as his strength increased, he realized that the recipes were too complicated. He had never even heard of the materials recorded in it. Because he couldn't collect the corresponding materials, he gave up on using the Jade Cauldron to refine immortal pills. Now, he finally understood. Apart from a few extremely low-grade elixirs, the rest of the elixir recipes were all elixir recipes of the immortal grade. No wonder he had never even heard of the ingredients of the elixir recipes in the recipe. The Fushi Cauldron has completed the He Tuesday. Does that mean that as long as I inscribe the Book of Luo inside, I can completely recover? Zhuowen's eyes lit up. Apart from the He-Tu and Luo-Shu, there's one more thing missing. That's Qing Huang. To put it bluntly, it's the artifact spirit of the Fushi Cauldron. The Fushi Cauldron is too damaged and its artifact spirit is nowhere to be found. There's still a long way to go before we can completely restore the Fushi Cauldron. Xiaohei shook her head. We're still missing an artifact spirit? Zhuowen frowned. He never thought that restoring the Fushi Cauldron would be so troublesome. Are you saying that the artifact spirit of the Fushi Cauldron is Qing Huang? Perhaps I know where Qing Huang is. The Bai Fong's gaze suddenly became strange when it heard the conversation between Zhuowen and Xiaohei. Chapter 1290. Qing Huang, I don't know about the Fushi Cauldron's artifact spirit, but I do know about a fellow who calls himself Qing Huang. Ever since I obtained the river diagram and the Book of Luo, that fellow has been following me," said the Baifeng as it rubbed its nose. "Following you? You mean that fellow is in the tomb, or is he near you?" Xiao Hei's eyes narrowed as she asked excitedly. Meanwhile, Zhuowen recalled the illusory voice that had spoken to the divine tortoise. He looked at Xiao Hei and asked, "Xiao Hei, do you think it's the voice that appeared in the Tower of Trials?" Xiao Hei looked relieved. She said, "You're right. Qing Huang likes to act mysterious. It's very likely that the owner of that voice is him. I actually didn't think of it. However, that fellow and the divine tortoise are both outside the land of inheritance. It won't be too late to look for that fellow after we leave." Zhuowen nodded and looked at Xiao Hei in surprise. It seemed like Xiao Hei was rather familiar with Qing Huang. She actually became excited when she heard about Qing Huang. This was rather rare. "Kid, the immortal force method you cultivated in the Tower of Trials is the most basic method. The immortal force you cultivate is at most low-grade. However, the 4 kills formation requires at least mid-grade immortal force to form. I'm very curious as to how you managed to form the 4 kills formation," the Baifeng suddenly asked curiously. Zhuowen smiled and took out the immortal stone. He said, "Because I have this immortal stone with me. The formation inside is extremely profound. It can fuse with mid-grade immortal force that's even more powerful than low-grade immortal force. So it's an immortal stone. I refined this little thing back in the Imperial region. I didn't expect it to fall into your hands. It seems like a portion of the formation inside the immortal stone is damaged. If it's complete, it should be able to fuse with high-grade immortal force," the Baifeng said with a smile as it toyed with the immortal stone. "High-grade immortal force? Senior, I wonder if you can repair the array formation inside the immortal stone?" Zhuowen suddenly asked. The Baifeng shook its head and said, "I'm just a strand of spirit now. I can't repair the immortal stone. But this immortal stone can store my spirit. Little fellow, this old man was the one who brought that heavenly worm here. Now, this old man will repay the karma that I planted back then." "Senior, what do you mean?" Zhuowen had an ominous feeling in his heart. "Originally, this strand of my spiritual sense was useless. However, if you have the celestial stones, this strand of my spiritual sense can be of some use. If you want to seal it, you must rely on my guidance." The Baifeng's eyes were filled with determination as he spoke indifferently. Zhuowen opened his mouth. He could see the determination in Elder Bai's eyes. The Baifeng's last strand of consciousness was already very weak. It could not withstand any disturbances. Otherwise, it could very well vanish into thin air. If Elder Bai followed him to the outside world to seal the heavenly worm, something bad might happen to him. As a result, Zhuowen was rather hesitant. There's no need to hesitate. The sealing formation of the heavenly worm is very complicated. You won't be able to learn it in a short amount of time. Only I can do it myself. You bringing the celestial stones might be the arrangement of the heavens." The Baifeng suddenly smiled. After a moment of silence, Zhuowen suddenly dropped to one knee and said with a deep voice, "Teacher?" Zhuowen said the 2 words very deeply. They contained many emotions. Although he had only known the Baifeng for a short time, the latter's sincerity and willingness to face death had deeply moved him. As a result, he called the Baifeng teacher from the bottom of his heart. The Baifeng was stunned. He stared at Zhuowen and his face became extremely gentle. He actually teared up. "Good, good, good. Little fellow, you're my first and only disciple. It's my fortune to be able to accept you. Teacher, do we leave right now?" Zhuowen raised his head and asked emotionally. The Baifeng shook his head. "Zhuowen, there's no need to leave right now. You should have seen the 16 steels on the stairs in the air, right? How do you feel?" Zhuowen was surprised. He said with a deep voice, "It's very profound. I can't understand it at all." The Baifeng smiled. "The 16 steels record my lifetime's work. Every single steel contains a formation. Before we leave, I'll explain the details and patterns of the steels to you in detail. Once I'm done, we can leave." After saying that, Bai Fong waved his sleeve. Immediately, the 16 stone tablets that were originally standing on the stairs in the air appeared above the pavilion. Then, with Bai Fong as the center, they all landed around them and surrounded them. The formations inscribed on the 16 steels are called the War God Portrait. Every single steel possesses great power. If you can grasp all the formations on the steels and use them proficiently, you will possess extremely great power. The Bai Fong explained the principles and structure of the War God portraits to Zhuowen with a smile. He explained very carefully, but a sliver of sorrow appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. Obviously, he understood the Bai Fong's intentions. The reason why he had stayed behind was obviously because this was the Bai Fong's first time being a teacher. Of course, it would also be his last time. He wanted to fulfill all his responsibilities as a teacher before leaving. Only then would he generously go out to deal with the insects. Zhuowen listened very seriously and deeply. He had even imprinted the Bai Fong's every action into his mind. Out of all the teachers he had met, the Bai Fong was the one who explained things the most carefully. He went from simple to complex, covering every aspect. Time passed day by day. A month passed by quietly. Finally, the Bai Fong, who was standing on top of the 16 stone tablets, stopped moving. His gaze landed on Zhuowen again as he smiled and said, "Zhuowen, do you understand everything?" "Teacher, can I say that I don't understand anything?" Zhuowen suddenly said in a deep voice after a moment of silence. The Bai Fong was stunned. He then shook his head and looked outside the pavilion. He said softly, "Zhuowen, there's no need to be sad. I'm already dead. This strand of consciousness will disperse at any time. Before it disappears, I can make up for my past mistakes." At this point, the Bai Fong turned his head and smiled brightly at Zhuowen. "I died a worthy death." At this moment, Xiao He also came to Zhuowen's side. He sighed, "Kid, the old man is right. With only a strand of consciousness left, even an arcane god master won't be able to save you." Zhuowen smiled and said, "I know. Teacher, let's go out." The Bai Fong took a deep look at Zhuowen. He also smiled and agreed. The body formed by his consciousness entered the immortal stone. War God Butchery, collect. After the Bai Fong entered the immortal stone, Zhuowen waved his sleeve and immediately put the 16 huge stone tablets into his spirit ring. Then, he stepped out without hesitation and directly left the white jade pavilion. At the bottom of the pool, in front of the stone statue, the divine turtle was lying quietly. He suddenly turned his head and said to the void, "Do you think that little guy can inherit my master's legacy? Aren't you talking nonsense? That little guy can definitely inherit your master's legacy. After all, he's more talented than your master." The ethereal voice suddenly sounded, causing the divine turtle to become angry out of humiliation. He said, "Damn it, why do you keep talking about this topic? Aren't you annoying?" I'm not annoying. If you feel annoyed, little turtle, come and bite me." In the face of the indecent ethereal voice, the divine turtle turned his head and pretended to be asleep. He ignored it. Whoosh! The sound of something breaking through the air suddenly shot out from the chest of the stone statue, attracting the attention of the black tortoise who was pretending to be asleep. Immediately, he saw a young man walking in the air and landing in front of the black tortoise. The divine turtle immediately raised his head and stared at Zhuowen. He asked, "You've completely inherited my master's legacy?" Zhuowen nodded and did not say a word. Instead, he looked around and asked the divine turtle, "The voice that kept talking to you just now, is its name Qing Huang? How did you know? Did my master say that?" The divine turtle widened his eyes and asked excitedly, "Yes." As he said that, Zhuowen took out the immortal stone, and a strand of Bai Fong's divine consciousness appeared above the immortal stone. Seeing Bai Fong's divine consciousness, the divine turtle quickly came in front of him and bowed down. he said excitedly. Master, you're not dead. You're really not dead. Ha ha. Bai Fong looked down at the divine turtle with a guilty look. He said, You've been protecting me for so long. It's been hard on you. The divine turtle shook his head and said, Hee, it's not hard at all. My life was given to me by you, Master. Why would I feel wronged? Bai Fong nodded. Then, he looked through the void and said, Cheng Huang, you pretentious guy. Why aren't you coming out yet? You must have noticed the Fushi cauldron a long time ago. Why didn't you come out to meet me? Before Bai Fong could finish, Xiao He flew out from between Zhuowen's eyebrows and said to Zhuowen and Bai Fong, I'm familiar with that guy. I'll call him a few times and he'll definitely come out obediently. After saying that, Blacka pointed at the void and shouted, The mount of this Lord Dragon back then, hurry up and come out. Kneel before this Lord Dragon's supreme power. Of course, when Xiao He said that, the void fell silent for a long time. Damn it. Don't even think about pretending in front of me. I know you're there. Come out now. If you don't come out, I'll drag you out myself. Xiao He continued to shout. He was still met with silence. At this moment, Xiao He felt a little embarrassed. He snorted and said, It seems like you're too scared to come out when you see me. But don't worry. Although I'm very powerful, I won't act recklessly. Just come out. Following that, Little He was still met with silence. This time, Little He was completely enraged. He coldly snorted and suddenly rushed toward the void. Then, he realized that he had pounced on nothing. Xiao He, what are you doing? I've come out a long time ago. I'm standing right here. Why are you going over there? Chapter 1291. Nine Heavens. Purple profound Thunderzhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly as he stared at the golden figure in the other space. The voice from earlier had clearly come from Xiao He's direction, yet the figure that had appeared was in the opposite space. Moreover, it had appeared without a sound. This made Zhuowen's expression change. At the same time, Zhuowen's gaze also landed on the golden figure, silently sizing it up. Within the golden light was a small beast. It was shaped like a fox with horns on its back, golden fur and golden eyes. Is this Cheng Huang? Zhuowen softly muttered as he stared at the little beast within the golden light. Pretentious brat, you've finally come out. Although I'm mighty, you shouldn't have been so scared that you hid all over the place. Xiao He coughed dryly in another part of the void and said pretentiously. A trace of craftiness appeared in Cheng Huang's golden eyes as it chuckled. Long time no see, little dragon. Look at you. Since when have you become a cute Xiao He dog? This style suits you very well. Xiao He's face immediately stiffened. Soon after, it pointed at Cheng Huang and shouted, Bastard, don't call me little dragon. If you do, I'll beat you into a pulp. Also, which part of this Lord Dragon looks like a dog? I'm clearly the mighty and domineering Great Nether Saint Dragon, all right? Don't spout nonsense if you don't understand. Is that so? Watch my dog-teasing skills. Cheng Huang smiled. Soon after, it waved its little paw and a strand of foxtail grass appeared. It then tossed it at Xiao He. Xiao He was stunned. It stared at the foxtail grass and stuck out its tongue in a very human-like manner. It curled up its body and extended its claws, continuously chasing after the foxtail grass as it whimpered. This scene completely shocked Zhuowen and the Bai Fong. Didn't Xiao He call itself the Great Nether Saint Dragon? Why was it behaving like a dog in front of the foxtail grass? Bastard! What do you take me for? Do you really think this Lord Dragon is a dog? Perhaps he'd noticed Zhuowen and Inferno Crane's strange gazes. Blackie suddenly howled furiously and slapped the green foxtail into pieces before howling furiously at Cheng Huang. All right, I'm not playing anymore. Cheng Huang chuckled and looked at Zhuowen. I never imagined that Master's Fushi cauldron would end up in this little guy's hands. I clearly remember that the Fushi cauldron wasn't on the Heavenly Armor continent back then. How did you obtain it? Zhuowen's heart skipped a beat when he heard Cheng Huang's question. Speaking of which, He was the one who had brought the Fushi cauldron over from Earth. The foreign spacetime that Qing Huang was talking about should be Earth. However, he naturally wouldn't say anything about Earth. He could only laugh and say, "I'm not sure either. I just got it by chance." "Qing Huang, why are you asking this? Since the Fushi cauldron is in Zhuowen's hands, it means that the Fushi cauldron chose him. This is also his opportunity. Otherwise, how could something like the Fushi cauldron become this kid's armor soul so easily?" Xiao He came to Zhuowen's side and said with some displeasure. Qing Huang nodded and smiled. "I'm just asking. Since the Fushi cauldron has become his armor soul, there's no way I can take it out. If this kid cultivates to the divine transformation realm in the future, he'll have the chance to completely materialize the Fushi cauldron. But you also became his armor soul. Could it be that you're planning to do the same?" Xiao He snorted and said, "This Lord Dragon's injuries are too severe. Plus, this kid has the Fushi cauldron on him. That's why I became his armor soul. If he can really reach the divine transformation realm, Zhuowen won't need me anymore. It'll be normal for me to regain my freedom." Hearing the conversation between the two, Zhuowen somewhat understood. It seemed that after a warrior advanced to the legendary divine transformation realm, the armor soul in their body would materialize. When that time came, Xiao He and the Fushi cauldron would be able to completely break away from him. Just as Xiao He said, if he could really reach the divine transformation realm, he would be standing at the peak of the continent. By then, he probably wouldn't need to rely on the power of the armor soul. Moreover, Xiao He's biggest wish was to recover. This was also what he had promised Xiao He back then. Qing Huang asked again, "If he can't reach the divine transformation realm, will you stay with him until he reaches the end of his life?" Xiao He did not answer Qing Huang directly. Instead, she said, "I trust Zhuowen." Seeing Xiao He like this, Zhuowen was moved. He could feel Xiao He's unreserved trust in him. Suddenly, Xiao He asked in a deep voice, "Qing Huang, do you know where Fushi is?" Qing Huang smiled bitterly and said, "No. The battle back then was too tragic. Even the Fushi cauldron was destroyed. If it weren't for my master, I'm afraid that my soul would have been destroyed." "Even you don't know?" Xiao He looked disappointed. However, he quickly recovered and continued, "Qing Huang, the Fushi cauldron is now with Zhuowen. You're the Fushi cauldron's spirit. Why don't you return to the Fushi cauldron? Are you saying that you want me to recognize this kid as my master?" Qing Huang's voice was rather cold. However, Xiao He shook her head and said, "There's no need for that. I know how you feel about Fushi. You just need to stay in the Fushi cauldron. After all, if the Fushi cauldron wants to recover its ability to refine pills, you need to be there." That's a great idea. You want me to refine pills for this kid and help him break through. Once he reaches the soul transformation realm, he'll be able to turn you into a physical object and regain your freedom. Qing Huang spoke in a slightly hostile tone. Xiao He was slightly annoyed and said, "Why don't you know what's good for you? I'm only a strand of my soul right now, and you're only an artifact spirit. What can you do without the Fushi cauldron? Can you find Fushi? Can you return to your former glory? The Fushi cauldron has already chosen Zhuowen. Why are you still so stubborn?" Qing Huang fell silent. In the end, it sighed softly, and its gaze descended onto Zhuowen. It said, "You're Zhuowen, right? I can help you, but you have to promise me two things." Zhuowen naturally didn't dare hesitate and hurriedly said, "Senior, feel free to speak. I'll naturally agree if I can. Actually, my request is very simple. I do plan on returning to the Fushi cauldron, but you have to help me find my master, Fushi. Also, if you're lucky enough to reach the soul transformation realm, then you have to release Xiao He and the Fushi cauldron. What do you think?" Qing Huang was quite satisfied with Zhuowen's attitude and said softly, "Of course," Zhuowen said without hesitation. Xiao He, however, said rather impatiently, Say, when did you become so wishy-washy? I've been with Zhuowen for many years, so I know him much better than you do. This kid is a man of his word. He promised me these two things before, so he definitely won't go back on his word. Qing Huang nodded and said to Zhuowen, Yes, I hope so. Zhuowen, take out the Fushi cauldron. I'll help you repair it. Zhuowen flicked his finger and immediately took out the damaged Fushi cauldron. Qing Huang looked at the damaged Fushi cauldron and sighed. I never thought that the Fushi cauldron would be so damaged. I'm afraid it won't be something that can be repaired in a short period of time. With that, Qing Huang said to the divine turtle, Little turtle, enter the Fushi cauldron with me. You were a member of the Fushi cauldron back then. The divine turtle roared, The formation of the Book of Luo was damaged long ago. I'm now a formation spirit that Master perfected. I have nothing to do with the Fushi cauldron. Little turtle, go ahead. I'm only left with a strand of my consciousness, and Zhuowen has obtained all of my inheritance. It's a wise choice for you to follow him, the Bai Fong suddenly said to the divine turtle. Master. The divine turtle looked at the Bai Fong with a tinge of sadness in his eyes. In the end, he sighed and turned into a stream of light, entering the Fushi cauldron. Zhuowen saw that there was another diagram on the body of the cauldron opposite the river diagram. There was a divine turtle in the diagram, and the diagram was the Book of Luo. The river diagram and the Book of Luo are complete. Now all that's left is for me to repair it. Qing Huang's eyes were filled with excitement. He laughed and turned into a ray of golden light that surged into the Fushi cauldron. Immediately, the originally dim Fushi cauldron erupted with an extremely blazing light. Zhuowen could clearly feel that the aura on the surface of the Fushi cauldron was constantly strengthening and perfecting. It was as Qing Huang had said. He was repairing the Fushi cauldron. The Fushi cauldron is too damaged. Even with the help of the river diagram, the Book of Luo and Qing Huang, it won't be completed in a short period of time. Now you should put the Fushi cauldron away, Xiaohe suddenly said. Zhuowen nodded and put away the Fushi cauldron. He looked at the Bai Fong and said, Teacher, are we going out now? The Bai Fong nodded. Just as it was about to speak, its expression changed. Immediately the entire pool shook violently. What's going on? Zhuowen and the Bai Fong looked at each other and asked in surprise. Not only the pool, but the entire Emperor's tomb also began to tremble. The trembling even began to spread, and it actually extended to the entire Sea of Bitterness. The Black Sea of Bitterness churned with huge black waves that swept up to the sky, and then sprinkled down from the sky. At this moment, it was as if the entire Sea of Bitterness was raining black rain. The black storm around the Emperor's tomb started to weaken. It slowly weakened and finally stopped dissipating. The 9 heavens' purple profound lightning in the dark clouds above the Emperor's tomb started to roar wildly. Countless purple lightning bolts that were as thick as water buckets fell from the sky and turned into a lightning prison that enveloped the entire Emperor's tomb. At this moment, all the warriors on the countless islands in the Bitter Sea noticed this scene. Soon after, they were stunned to discover that the Emperor's tomb in the distance was slowly rising under the cover of the terrifying 9 heavens' purple profound lightning, all the way to 100,000 feet in the sky. Boom! Boom! Chapter 1292. Purple lightning riot in the middle of the endless void in the Emperor's tomb, a huge palace world quietly floated in the air. At this moment, the palace world was filled with dense black qi. Within the black qi, an extremely huge figure slowly stood in the middle of the palace. A pair of small sun-like blood-red eyes pierced through the endless black qi and looked at the sky above the Emperor's tomb. I want to get out. Even if the price is high, I will charge out. Tiangu's hoarse voice rang out from the black qi. His voice was filled with tyranny. Rumble! In the sky above the Emperor's tomb, the 9 heavens' purple profound lightning began to crazily gather within the rolling dark clouds. Like a huge lightning dragon, it twisted its terrifying body and roared as it suddenly swooped down, heavily slamming into the pyramid-shaped emperor's tomb. Bang bang bang! Under the attack of the huge lightning dragon, the entire emperor's tomb shook violently. The surface of the bitter sea below the emperor's tomb surged with waves that spread in all directions. In the region where the emperor's tomb was located, a pitter-patter of black rain rose. On the shore of the pool, Mu Feng's eyes were filled with fear. He naturally felt the tremors that permeated the entire emperor's tomb and could not help but exclaim, "What's going on? Why is there such a terrifying tremor in the emperor's tomb?" Tiangu's eyes lit up as he laughed towards the sky. The day of the 9 heavens purple profound lightning riot has finally arrived. Originally, I thought that I would have to rely on that old fart's inheritance to escape. Now, there's no need for that, haha. 9 heavens purple profound lightning riot? Mu Feng's eyes were filled with astonishment. Having stayed in the bitter sea for close to 100 years, he naturally knew what the 9 heavens purple profound lightning riot was. The 9 heavens purple profound lightning was a strange lightning that existed in the emperor's tomb. Ever since the emperor's tomb was formed, the 9 heavens purple profound lightning was extremely powerful. An ordinary 9 heavens purple profound lightning was enough to kill a peak heavenly venerable practitioner. The more powerful 9 heavens purple profound lightning could even threaten a martial emperor practitioner. After countless years of condensation, the 9 heavens purple profound lightning above the emperor's tomb would increase. It was like a pool of water. If too much water was poured in, it would overflow. The principle of the 9 heavens purple profound lightning was similar. Once too much 9 heavens purple profound lightning was gathered, there would be a huge explosion. The eruption this time was called the 9 heavens purple profound thunder riot by the bitter sea martial artists. Mu Feng, there's no need to wait any longer. Follow me back to the palace world and set up the boundless lightning drawing grand formation. Once I'm free, I'll help you blast open this old bastard's land of inheritance. His inheritance will all be yours. The heavenly insect illusory figure laughed out loud. With a wave of his right hand, a large hand that was formed from black chi grabbed Mu Feng and disappeared in front of the pool. At the bottom of the pool, Zhuowen and the Bai Feng looked at each other. The Bai Feng's expression became somewhat ugly. He said in a low voice, "It's the 9 heavens purple profound lightning. This is bad. The 9 heavens purple profound lightning has accumulated above the emperor's tomb for hundreds of years. Now that it has suddenly erupted, its energy will be extremely terrifying. Perhaps the heavenly insect can borrow the power of the 9 heavens purple profound lightning to break through the seal." "What?" Zhuowen's expression changed slightly and he said, "We have to get out quickly. We have to stop that heavenly worm from breaking the seal." The Bai Feng nodded and entered the immortal stone. Zhuowen brought Xiao He and flew toward the surface of the pool. Rumble! Rumbling 9 heavens purple profound lightning began to gather in the clouds. Previously, when the lightning dragon bombarded the emperor's tomb, it had caused the emperor's tomb to shake violently. Now, the 9 heavens purple profound lightning gathered again, transforming into thousands of lightning snakes. Every lightning snake was 1,000 feet long. Thousands of lightning snakes shot out and bombarded the emperor's tomb. An even more intense tremor spread out. The bitter sea boiled, and water pillars rose into the sky like countless black pythons. "It's the 9 heavens purple profound lightning. Why would it erupt at this time?" Countless warriors on the islands of the bitter sea raised their heads and looked at the terrifying 9 heavens purple profound lightning above the emperor's tomb. Their eyes were filled with shock. Although many of the islands in the Sea of Misery had been destroyed due to the celestial insect's clone, making them desolate and uninhabited, the Sea of Misery was extremely vast. No matter how many clones there were back then, it was impossible for them to envelop all the islands in the Sea of Misery in a short amount of time. Therefore, although many islands had been destroyed by the heavenly insect avatar, there were still some islands that were further away that were still intact. On the auspicious God Island, Many students of the auspicious God Academy had also noticed the 9 heavens purple profound lightning erupting in the direction of the Emperor's tomb. 2 beautiful figures slowly walked out from a huge building in the middle of the academy. The 2 figures had graceful figures. One was a young woman with a voluptuous figure, and the other was a young girl with a delicate face. Both of them had a pair of thin wings behind their backs, and the key parts of their bodies were covered with fur. They looked exceptionally seductive. Aunt Yao, that's the direction of the Emperor's tomb. Master's body. Wu Dai's beautiful eyes gathered on the 9 heavens purple profound lightning in the distance, and her eyes were filled with worry. Yao Dai's face became a little ugly and said, "The 9 heavens purple profound lightning erupting. This is very likely related to the heavenly insect avatar. Wu Dai, Aunt Yao wants to go over and take a look. You stay on the auspicious God Island first." Wu Dai directly stood in front of Yao Dai and said angrily, "Aunt Yao, I want to go too. I'm a demon emperor now, so I want to go over and take a look." Yao Dai looked at the stubborn Wu Dai and sighed. "All right, but if there's any danger, you must leave first. Do you understand?" And Wu Dai nodded, and a trace of a smile appeared in her beautiful eyes. "Demon soldiers, gather and set up the demon god array." Yao Dai and Wu Dai flew into the sky, and Yao Dai's majestic voice echoed throughout the entire academy. Instantly, countless demon soldiers with powerful auras flew out from every corner of the academy, and lined up neatly in the void. Waves of demon chi filled the air, and turned into 1,000 feet large demon god avatar. Many students of the auspicious God Academy looked at the huge demon god avatar, and their eyes were filled with reverence. The demon soldiers in the demon god array were all demon emperors, and every one of them was stronger than them. Even their academy's principal would find it difficult to suppress the demon god. Boom! Boom! The demon god avatar appeared, and with a step, it headed towards the Emperor's tomb. A figure suddenly broke out of the water above the Emperor's tomb's pool, before slowly landing on the shore. He looked around before speaking in a rather surprised manner. "Mu Feng and the heavenly insect's illusory figure are actually not here?" With the 9 heavens purple profound lightning going berserk, those 2 fellows must be in a hurry to break the seal. Xiao He said indifferently. "Let's go. Let's go to the palace world." Zhuowen nodded, and with a step, 3 pairs of lightning wings unfurled behind his back. His entire person turned into a bolt of lightning, and disappeared from where he stood. In the palace world, Mu Feng's hands danced in the air above the surging black qi. His movements were like flowing water, and it was quite beautiful. As he continued to dance, the outline of a huge array appeared in the air above the black qi. After the array was formed, Mu Feng waved his sleeves, and countless crystals poured out from his spiritual ring. Soon after, Mu Feng shouted, "Lightning drawl," as he said that, the 9 heavens purple profound lightning above the Emperor's tomb became even more terrifying. Soon after, the array started to emit a pillar of light, which led to the top of the Emperor's tomb. Rumble! Under the bombardment of the pillar of light, a huge gap appeared at the top of the Emperor's tomb. Like a magnet, the 9 heavens purple profound lightning in the air surged towards the gap. Like a river of 9 heavens purple profound lightning, it was extremely terrifying. Bang bang bang! Countless purple lightning bolts descended, bombarding the palace world. At the same time, Mu Feng activated the limitless lightning drawing grand array, and directed the 9 heavens purple profound lightning that had gathered towards the gigantic black chain around the heavenly insect's waist. Crackle crackle crackle! At the instant when the lightning bolts landed on the chain, countless electrical sparks started to spread out. Strange sounds rang out, and the entire chain started to shake intensely. "Still not enough, continue." The heavenly insect's deep voice rang out. Mu Feng nodded his head, and started to fully activate the limitless lightning drawing grand array. Rolling lightning bolts continued to descend from the sky, causing the black chain to shake intensely once again. Furthermore, the frequency of the shaking was even higher than before. At the same time, the heavenly insect was using its supreme might to complement the power of the 9 heavens' purple profound lightning to continuously bombard the final thick ceiling chain. 1,000 meters away from the palace world, Zhuowen with 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back appeared. His gaze landed on the heavenly insect that was continuously bombarding the ceiling chain, as his face turned extremely ugly. "Stop him!" With a fierce roar, Zhuowen shot straight towards Mu Feng, who was continuously operating the infinite lightning-drawing grand array. Immortal force surged out from his body, as he drew out a slaughtering array diagram in one go, before sending it enveloping Mu Feng. "Damn it! It's that Zhuowen! Why did he come out of the inheritance land at this time?" Mu Feng, who was originally guiding the 9 heavens' purple profound lightning, naturally saw Zhuowen charging towards him, causing his face to instantly turn extremely ugly. "Continue to attract lightning. Let this king block this brat." The deep voice of the heavenly insect rang out, causing Mu Feng's originally somewhat flustered state of mind to slowly calm down, before continuing to guide the 9 heavens' purple profound lightning. With a furious roar, the heavenly insect exploded out with endless black chi, before transforming into 10 gigantic heavenly insect phantoms that were several hundred feet long before Mu Feng. Roar! With a roar, the 10 heavenly insect phantoms stomped towards Zhuowen with their legs that were akin to pillars that supported the heavens. Every single step they took possessed a terrifying might that could shatter the heavens and shatter the earth. "Slaughtering array diagram, break for me!" With a low roar, Zhuowen sent the slaughtering array diagram shooting out. Countless slaughtering sword phantoms that were akin to densely packed blood clouds slammed into the bodies of the 10 gigantic heavenly insect phantoms, causing the latter to stagger back a few steps. "Human, your strength is too weak. You dare to obstruct this king from breaking the seal? You're simply courting death." The heavenly insect burst out in hearty laughter, while a look of disdain flashed across his eyes. "Courting death? I don't think so." With a cold sneer, Zhuowen immediately took out immortal stones and condensed even purer immortal energy. Extending his hands out into the void, he started to slowly move them, before drawing out the slaughtering, exterminating array diagrams. 4 slaughtering array diagram, kill for me. The moment the 4 slaughtering array diagram appeared, the 10 heavenly insect phantoms were instantly shredded into nothingness under the power of the slaughtering ultimacy. At the same time, Zhuowen took a step forward, shooting towards Mu Feng like a hot knife through butter. Chapter 1293. Great Tomb Array Bastard. Lightning Dragon. Seeing Zhuowen rushing straight towards him, Mu Feng's eyes shrunk slightly. With a stern howl, the seal formed by his hand changed. Countless 9 heavens purple profound lightning descended from the sky, gathering together to form a gigantic lightning dragon. At the instant he attracted the gigantic lightning dragon, Mu Feng took a gentle step forward, entering the palace world. Rushing to the side of the heavenly worm, he stared at Zhuowen with fear in his eyes. The 10 doppelgangers formed by the heavenly worm were instantly annihilated by Zhuowen. Such combat strength caused even him to tremble. Swoosh! Zhuowen stopped outside the palace world. His gaze landed on Mu Feng as he coldly said, "Mu Feng, didn't you want to capture me? Now that I've appeared in front of you, why have you fled instead?" Mu Feng's expression was ugly. Looking at the 4 kills array around Zhuowen, shock and fear were revealed in his eyes. This array was definitely not something that a mere Zhuowen had set up. It was very likely that Zhuowen had obtained it from the inheritance grounds. "You've obtained the inheritance of the Emperor Tomb's owner?" Mu Feng's voice gradually turned dark and cold. "What do you think?" Zhuowen replied in an indifferent manner. Although killing intent was surging within his eyes, he did not dare to enter the palace world. The lesson of the Blood Devil was still deeply etched in his mind. He did not believe that his current strength was stronger than the Blood Devil. Even the blood devil had been absorbed by the heavenly worm after entering the palace world, and could only use the blood escape to escape. As expected, Zhuowen, if you have the ability, come in and kill me now. Mu Feng narrowed his eyes, and suddenly spoke in a somewhat mocking manner. Zhuowen's expression hardened slightly, as he stared at the endless black qi within the palace world, as well as the squirming heavenly worm figure within it. With a cold snort, he planned to enter the palace world. However, he was stopped by the Baifeng. Zhuowen, don't go in. The heavenly worm's strength is getting stronger and stronger. Furthermore, the palace world has already become the heavenly worm's domain. Its strength inside is extremely terrifying. You'll be like a lamb entering the mouth of a tiger if you enter. The Baifeng spoke in a solemn manner. Zhuowen's footsteps paused for a moment before he frowned and asked, "Teacher, what should I do?" "Let's leave the monarch's tomb. This monarch's tomb was built by me back then. Although I am only a strand of my consciousness now, I can still activate the mechanisms of the monarch's tomb with the help of the celestial stone. This heavenly insect is too dangerous. Even if I have to destroy the entire monarch's tomb, I will destroy this heavenly insect," Baifeng said in a low voice. Zhuowen felt a chill in his heart. No wonder Baifeng wanted him to leave the emperor's tomb now. It turned out that he planned to completely destroy the emperor's tomb. This emperor's tomb was extremely huge, and the energy it contained was probably earth-shattering. Once it self-destructed, even if the sky worm escaped, it would be difficult to withstand the power of the emperor's tomb. "Go!" After saying that, Zhuowen took a step forward and turned into a bolt of lightning. He left the palace world at an extremely fast speed. Rumble! At the instant Zhuowen left, the terrifying lightning dragon in the sky above the palace world roared. Under Mu Feng's guidance, it heavily bombarded the last chain behind the sky worm. Countless bolts of lightning filled the air. Strands of lightning were like little snakes as they continuously slithered around the surface of the chain. At the same time, the sky worm roared furiously and violently smashed its fist against the chain. Instantly, the sound of metal clashing rang out. "Break!" The heavenly worm roared. Borrowing the power of the lightning dragon, it began to continuously bombard the chain. Punch after punch, one could only hear a cracking sound. Under the combined attacks of the lightning dragon and the heavenly worm, the chain finally shattered completely, turning into countless Black Death years. Bang! At the instant when the chain shattered, the black aura in the entire palace world boiled and churned. A wave of evil and vast aura swept out. Mu Feng, who was standing by the side, trembled all over when he sensed this aura. His face turned pale. So strong! Is this the full extent of the Lord's strength? Mu Feng trembled slightly. At this moment, the pressure radiating from the sky worm's body was truly too terrifying. If not for his cultivation as an arcane heavenly master, he might have already knelt on the ground under this pressure. At the entrance of the tomb, Zhuowen seemed to have sensed something. Turning his head slightly, he stopped and looked into the distance. Staring at the palace world far behind him, his expression fluctuated unpredictably. "Let's go. I'm afraid that the sky worm has already escaped. Let's quickly leave the emperor's tomb," said the Baifeng in a deep voice. Zhuowen nodded. Without further delay, he took a step forward and walked out of the tomb. After exiting the ravine, he arrived in the sky above the emperor's tomb. So many corpses. Were all these done by the sky worm? The instant he appeared in the sky above the ground, Zhuowen looked down. His pupils shrank slightly as he saw the corpses of cultivators everywhere. Furthermore, these corpses were all shriveled up, looking just like dried corpses. Previously, Zhuowen's Buddhist avatar had left in a hurry, so he did not take a closer look. Now that his main body had arrived on the ground that was already in a mess, his eyes could not help but emit a cold light. Although he was not someone who bemoaned the state of the universe and pitted the fate of mankind, these were human cultivators after all. To have their flesh and blood sucked dry by a monster like the sky worm and die in such a miserable manner, he naturally felt somewhat displeased. Ha ha! After trapping me for nearly 1,000 years, I'm finally going to come out. A thunderous voice rang out from the ravine below. It was like a great bell ringing in Zhuowen's ears. At the same time, he saw that the strange black gas had spread out once again. It was actually sweeping towards the ground. Let's go! Zhuowen's eyes were filled with shock. The 3 pairs of lightning wings on his back unfurled, and he instantly disappeared from the sky above the ground. When he appeared at the entrance of the Emperor's tomb, the Baifeng's strand of divine sense appeared from the celestial stone. He formed a seal with his hands, and waves of celestial force were created from the celestial stone. Then, the entrance to the Emperor's tomb was sealed. Master! Not long after Zhuowen left the Emperor's tomb, a clear voice rang out. Then, Zhuowen saw the huge demon god not far away step forward. Wu Dai flew out from the center of the demon god array and came to Zhuowen's side. She hugged Zhuowen without hesitation, causing the latter's expression to become extremely awkward. Yao Dai, who was in the center of the demon god array, quietly looked at Wu Dai and Zhuowen with a knowing smile. But soon, her gaze gathered on the celestial stone's illusory figure, and her delicate body could not help but be stunned. Master! Yao Dai spat out these 2 words with difficulty. Her eyes were fixed on the Baifeng's divine sense, and there was a trace of mist in her beautiful eyes. She took a step forward and came before the Baifeng. Her voice trembled as she said, Master, you are really Master? The Baifeng quietly looked at Yao Dai and sighed softly. Yao Dai, didn't I ask you to lead the demon soldiers out of the Emperor's tomb back then? You actually stayed in there all this time. It's really hard on you. Zhuowen had naturally told the Baifeng about Yao Dai and the demon soldiers. Therefore, after seeing Yao Dai, the Baifeng was not too surprised. Instead, it was a little emotional. It's not hard on me, it's not hard on me. Yao Dai is willing to do all this. Yao Dai shook her head and smiled sweetly. Rumble. Suddenly, the Emperor's tomb, which was originally sealed, began to shake violently. The huge pyramid on the Sea of Bitterness shook continuously, causing monstrous waves to rise. Baifeng, you can't trap me. Even if you seal all the entrances to the Emperor's tomb, you still can't trap me. A thunderous voice resounded from the Emperor's tomb. It was like an echo that spread out in all directions. It resounded through the clouds, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. The heavenly worm has broken the seal? Yao Dai's face was slightly pale, and her voice trembled as she spoke. The Baifeng nodded. Its eyes were grave as it said, Looks like the heavenly worm's power has exceeded my expectations. It can actually shake the Emperor's tomb. As it spoke, the Baifeng's gaze landed on Zhuowen and Yao Dai. It said, Zhuowen, Yao Dai, take everyone and retreat 1,000 miles away. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He knew that the Baifeng was planning to destroy the entire Emperor's tomb. The Emperor's tomb was simply too huge. The array within it was probably extremely terrifying. He wondered if the Baifeng could withstand the array within the Emperor's tomb. Teacher, you, Zhuowen said hesitantly. The Baifeng smiled and said, Don't worry. Although the array within the Emperor's tomb is huge, and I am only a strand of divine thought, I can use the immortal stone to borrow your power to activate the array within the Emperor's tomb. Moreover, the array within the Emperor's tomb was already set up by me 1,000 years ago. Activating it won't consume too much energy. Zhuowen nodded when he heard that. He took Wu Dai and retreated in the opposite direction of the Emperor's tomb. Yao Dai also took the demon god array and retreated majestically. Boom, 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 boom. 1,000 miles away, Zhuowen and the others stared silently at the shaking Emperor's tomb. Their eyes were filled with seriousness because they discovered that the Emperor's tomb was shaking much more violently than before. Countless black storms swept through the embittered sea, as well as pitter-patter black rain. Zhuowen, channel all your mental energy and yuan force into the immortal stone and help me, the Baifeng said to Zhuowen in a deep voice. Zhuowen did not hesitate. Holding the immortal stone in his right hand, the mental energy and yuan force in his Naiwen palace flowed into the immortal stone like rivers flowing into the sea. Immediately, milky white immortal force erupted from the immortal stone and surged out. Zhuowen's mental energy had already reached the arcane heavenly master realm, and his yuan force had already reached the emperor realm. The immortal force he gathered was even purer and more vigorous than before. As the milky white immortal force surged out, it entered the Baifeng's divine thought. The Baifeng squinted its eyes and formed seals with its hands. The seals were so complicated that even Zhuowen felt his eyes swell up when he saw them. Tu Marais, open! After forming the last seal, the Baifeng slowly said these words. At this moment, the Thearcha's tomb thousands of kilometers away began to shrink. The thick, yellow stone on the surface began to move, and as it shrank, the Thearcha's tomb began to expand once more. Whoosh! Chapter 1294. Play. The depths of the Emperor's tomb had already been corroded by the black qi. Tiangu's body became even more imposing and terrifying. Countless tentacles shot out from the black qi. They were like thousands of ropes as they interweaved in the void. Oh? That old bastard has actually closed the Emperor's tomb. Perhaps sensing something, Tiangu's body paused. His blood-red eyes pierced through the void and landed on the surroundings of the Emperor's tomb. He could sense that the entrances to the Emperor's tomb had all been sealed. Boom, boom, boom. Not long after the entrances were sealed, Tiangu's sharp senses discovered that waves of terrifying energy had begun to surge out from the Emperor's tomb. The energy contained destructive power. Oh no, is that old bastard going to activate the tomb formation? Damn it. Tiangu's blood-red eyes immediately revealed a panicked expression when he sensed the energy from the depths of the Emperor's tomb. Tiangu had been trapped in the Emperor's tomb for nearly 1,000 years. His understanding of the Emperor's tomb was basically no less than that of the Baifeng. Naturally, he knew that there was an extremely terrifying formation in the Emperor's tomb. The formation was called the Tomb Formation. It was something that the Baifeng had spent a great deal of effort to set up when it was building the Emperor's tomb. Its power was extremely terrifying. Its purpose was to increase its power at the cost of destroying the Emperor's tomb to suppress Tiangu. Back then, Tiangu had used everything he had to completely suppress the Baifeng, causing the latter's soul to almost scatter. He did not have any extra strength to activate the Tomb Formation. In the end, the Baifeng could only temporarily seal Tiangu in the Emperor's tomb. Logically speaking, the old bastard Baifeng's soul should have either been scattered or only left with a strand of his consciousness. In such a state, it is impossible for him to activate the Tomb Formation. Tiangu frowned slightly and muttered in a somewhat low voice. Sir, I'm afraid that this has something to do with Zhuowen. After all, the Baifeng's inheritance was obtained by Zhuowen. Mu Feng's eyes were filled with panic. He arrived beside Tiangu and spoke with a trembling voice. He could also sense the terrifying destructive energy in the depths of the Emperor's tomb. He knew that the energy was not something that he could endure. Bastard! Tiangu roared furiously. Immediately, the endless black qi within the god tomb began to shrink towards Tiangu's body. It began to form many black barriers around his body. As the black qi continued to gather, the black barriers began to become thicker and thicker. There were faint signs that they were turning into keratin. Sir, there's still me. Looking at this scene, Mu Feng could not help but speak up. He was truly afraid that the heavenly insect would abandon him. Get your ass in here. That tomb formation is about to be activated. The celestial insect didn't waste any more words. On the surface of the black barrier, a hole as tall as a person appeared. Mu Feng's eyes lit up with joy as he hurriedly entered the hole. After he entered the hole the hole closed up and returned to its original state. At this moment, the Emperor's tomb had risen to a height of 10,000 miles in the outside world. A supreme and terrifying energy began to flow out from the Emperor's tomb. Moreover, the energy was becoming more and more terrifying. Milky white light began to appear in the cracks of the huge rocks on the surface of the Emperor's tomb. The light became more and more intense, and it almost dyed the entire Emperor's tomb white. Bai Fong muttered. Suddenly, the Emperor's tomb exploded under the milky white light. At this moment, the entire sea of bitterness seemed to have quietened down. The white light that filled the sky spread out, and the originally dark sea of bitterness turned into a vast expanse of white. Everywhere one could see, there was only white, a dazzling white. The Emperor's tomb exploded on the countless islands in the sea of bitterness. All the martial artists raised their heads. Looking at the Emperor's tomb that was filled with terrifying white light, they opened their mouths and revealed shocked expressions. The Emperor's tomb was extremely symbolic in the sea of bitterness. After all, the Emperor's tomb would open once every 300 years. It contained the coveted heart of imperial power, as well as other good things. However, many martial artists felt that something was wrong with the Emperor's tomb this time. After all, the disaster caused by Tiangu's clone was still vivid in the minds of many martial artists in the Sea of Bitterness. Now that the Emperor's tomb suddenly moved, rising to the sky and exploding, many martial artists in the Sea of Bitterness felt that something was wrong. Something must have happened in the Emperor's tomb. Hence, many martial artists in the Sea of Bitterness were discussing what had happened in the Emperor's tomb. The terrifying white light lasted for nearly half an hour before it finally subsided. The white light in the sky faded away, revealing the dusky sky of the Sea of Bitterness. The void where the Emperor's tomb was located was filled with spatial cracks. Terrifying hurricanes swept out from the cracks. It was the wind of the void in the spatial cracks. It was extremely terrifying. In the region surrounded by countless spatial cracks, a lump of black paste was wriggling continuously. As the paste wriggled, it emitted an extremely frightening and sinister sound. Bai Fong, Zhuowen, both of you deserve to die. How dare you trick me? 1,000 miles away, Zhuowen and the Bai Fong's pupils shrank. Under such a terrifying tomb array, this Tiangu was still alive. How could this fellow's life force be so vigorous? With great difficulty, Mu Feng squeezed his way out of the wriggling paste. His face was as pale as snow, while his eyes were filled with shock and fear. The great burial formation was too terrifying. Even though the heavenly insect had unleashed all of its abilities to create an exceedingly thick black barrier, it was still seriously injured by such a terrifying explosion. Boom! The wriggling paste body quickly regained its shape and regained the appearance of a heavenly worm. However, the aura on the heavenly worm's body was not as powerful as it was when it escaped. Instead, it was much weaker. Zhuowen could even see black qi continuously seeping out from the surface of the heavenly worm. After the black qi spread, it was annihilated in the air and disappeared. Clearly, the black qi was the source of Tiangu. At this moment, due to his serious injuries, his source was constantly dissipating. Bastard, bastard, bastard! Tiangu was flustered and exasperated. He said bastard 3 times in a row. From this, one could see how angry he was in his heart. After breaking the seal, his strength had almost reached the level of a half-saint. However, due to the power of the tomb array, he was seriously injured and his strength was far from his peak. This Tiangu's life source is so powerful. The tomb array can't kill him? The Bai Fong frowned and sighed. Zhuowen and Bai Fong, you old bastard. It's really the two of you. Die. After cursing for a while, Skyworm's eyes locked onto Zhuowenhe, who was a Bai Fong formed by Zhuowenhe's divine consciousness. With a roar, its enormous body rushed over. Zhuowen, be careful. Enter the demon god array and deal with this Tiangu together. Looking at the approaching Tiangu, Yao Dai's expression changed drastically. She grabbed Wu Dai and entered the core of the demon god array. At the same time, she called out to Zhuowen. However, Zhuowen shook his head. His eyes were blazing as he stared at the approaching Tiangu. He said, "Senior Yao Dai, you don't have to interfere in this matter. Let me deal with this Tiangu." Due to the terrifying explosive power of the tomb array, Tiangu's strength had been reduced to less than 10%. Zhuowen wanted to see if he was a match for Tiangu. Yao Dai and Wu Dai were stunned. Soon after, Yao Dai shouted, "Are you crazy? This is a Tiangu. My master once died because of it. How can you deal with it?" However, Zhuowen shook his head. He took a step forward and rushed directly toward Tiangu. Within his body, a monstrous dragon roar resounded and rushed into the sky. Then, a terrifying black light rushed out from between his eyebrows. Roar! The black light rushed out and turned into a dragon's body. A pair of small sun-like golden eyes emitted an extremely cold light. The great Nether Saint Dragon? Bastard, die! Tiangu's eyes were cold as he roared angrily. "You want me to die? You don't have the right." Blackie let out a cold laugh. Its enormous dragon claws descended from the sky and heavily collided with the 12 arms of the heavenly worm. Immediately, a frightening force erupted. An extremely ear-piercing explosion resounded in the sky above the Sea of Bitterness, and huge waves rose from the surface of the Sea of Bitterness. How terrifying! That black dragon is too terrifying. It actually has a dragon's body. What kind of existence is it? On the island, countless cultivators in the Sea of Misery raised their heads and looked up at the great Nether Saint Dragon and Tiangu, who were fighting in the sky. Their eyes were filled with shock. Whether it was the great Nether Saint Dragon or Tiangu, the power that they displayed was too terrifying. It could be said that a casual blow from the two had the power to shatter heaven and earth. If an ordinary Emperor Realm cultivator came into contact with the aftermath of their battle, they would be annihilated immediately. At this moment, all the cultivators on the wonderful Spirit Island raised their heads. They naturally saw the great Nether Divine Dragon and Tiangu floating in the sky. The shock in their eyes became even more intense because they also saw a figure on the great Nether Saint Dragon. With their martial strength, they could naturally see things in the distance. They naturally saw the figure on the great Nether Saint Dragon clearly. This figure was no stranger to them. It was the genius of the wonderful Spirit Academy, Zhuowen. Zhuowen had once caused a great uproar in the academy. Most of the cultivators on the wonderful Spirit Island naturally recognized Zhuowen. It's Zhuowen. It's actually Zhuowen. That terrifying dragon was summoned by Zhuowen? All the cultivators on the wonderful Spirit Island were shocked. After the shock, they revealed extremely excited expressions. They could all feel the terror of the great Nether Saint Dragon and Tiangu. After all, Zhuowen was a member of the wonderful Spirit Academy. Zhuowen calmly stared at the great Nether Divine Dragon and Tiangu, who were constantly fighting. After a while, his gaze fell on Mu Feng, who was not far away. He smiled faintly and said, "Master Mu Feng, why don't the two of us play?" Mu Feng, who had just experienced the burial array, had just recovered. At this moment, when he saw that Zhuowen was looking at him, his face couldn't help but stiffen. "What? You don't dare?" The corners of Zhuowen's mouth curved as he smiled. "Humph! Why wouldn't I dare? Without the great Nether Saint Dragon, how much strength can you display?" You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.